Chapter 621, Hantai Entertainment Club. Dong Hu tried to make trouble for their car last time, but in the end, he fell down the hill. Zhang Han didn't see his ending, but he knew that Dong Hu would only suffer slight injury if he was lucky, and die if he was unlucky. Dong Hu's present condition proved that he was very lucky. As for Ma Sanman, Zhang Han had conflicts with him. He was a member of a big family in Xiqing district and the nephew of Patriarch Ma. Several years ago, Zhang Han was so arrogant that he went to challenge Ma Sanman in Xiqing district, who was badly injured by him. Ma Sanman was not convinced, so he went to learn freestyle grappling for 2 months and challenged Zhang Han again. Though they were close to each other in strength, Zhang Han won and seriously injured Ma Sanman again in the end. Ma Sanman learned Taekwondo for another 2 months and challenged Zhang Han with enough confidence. However, just as he rushed to Zhang Han, he made a false step and his face hit Zhang Han's fist directly. That was their last fight. Later, Ma Sanman was taken away by his elders for business and gave up the idea of challenging Zhang Han. In Zhang Han's view, he was very interesting. As for Liu Yun, who Linji had mentioned, he was once taught a lesson by Zhang Han after bullying Zhang Li. Linji smiled when he heard that Zhang Han had agreed to keep the appointment. He just regarded Zhang Han as a toy rather than an opponent, and he didn't know what was waiting for him. Zhang Han hung up and shook his head slightly. Zhang Han was not interested in Dong Hu, a coward. As for Linji, Zhang Han was going to teach him a lesson because of what he had done before, but he didn't expect Linji to come to him first. If Linji had contacted the martial arts world and learned of Zhang Han's identity, he would have escaped from Shangjing to protect himself as soon as Zhang Han arrived. However, Linji didn't know that he was in danger at all. Even the Zhang family didn't know Zhang Han's identity in the beginning. There were few people who knew that Zhang Han was Zhang Han Yang, which was also the reason why martial artists used this kind of inner circle nickname in the beginning. Zhang Han finished thinking, put his mobile phone on the coffee table, and went to the bedroom. At the door, he heard Xian and Meng Meng discussing where to go tomorrow. Would you like to go there? What's this, Mama? This is the Palace Museum and the Forbidden City of Ancient Times. The area of this scenic spot is very large. Is there a Ferris wheel? No, they don't have a Ferris wheel there. Is there a merry-go-round? No, it's a scenic spot, not an amusement park. Xian was amused by Meng Meng. Zhang Han came in, smiled, and said, why not go to the amusement park? Meng Meng was overjoyed. Wow! Meng Meng stood up from the bed, ran up to Zhang Han, jumped into his arms, and kissed him on the face. You will spoil Meng Meng. Xian rolled her eyes at Zhang Han. Of course, she is my unique little princess, right Meng Meng? Zhang Han smiled. Yes, I like Papa the best. Meng Meng was still in Zhang Han's arms. Xian pretended to be annoyed. You don't like Mama? Yes, I don't like you for the time being. Meng Meng pretended to be angry as well. Huh? Xian sat upright and said deliberately with a serious look, Mama is angry. Huh? Meng Meng was surprised. She looked up at Xian carefully but failed to understand her emotions. So she raised her head and looked at Zhang Han. Papa, Mama is bullying me. Really? How did she bully you? Zhang Han asked. She scolded me. I see. Let me punish her. Zhang Han put Meng Meng down and climbed forward to crush Xian on the bed. Ah! Xian screamed under the pressure. Dare you scold Meng Meng again? Zhang Han stretched his hands to Xian's waist and tickled her. Xian was ticklish, so she wriggled like a snake on the bed and couldn't help laughing. When Meng Meng saw it, she ran to join in the fun and touched Xian's waist with her little hands. The family of 3 started to play in bed. Half a minute later, Xian begged for mercy. Okay, don't scratch me, it's too itchy. Is it your fault? Zhang Han said with a light cough. Yes. Will you scold Meng Meng again? Will you scold Meng Meng again? Meng Meng echoed. No. Seeing that Xian had given in, Zhang Han released her. However, he felt a little hot because of Xian's wriggle, so he motioned to Xian with his eyes. Xian blinked as she received Zhang Han's signal. After rolling her eyes at Zhang Han, Xian reached out and scraped at the tip of Meng Meng's nose. HMPH, you are a child without a conscience. You are actually bullying your mama together with your papa. No, well, I'm not. Meng Meng didn't want to answer this accusation, so she looked up at Zhang Han and said, Papa, do you think so? Ah, well, this. Zhang Han said hesitantly with a smile, I'm afraid not. Meng Meng also likes her mama, don't you? Yes. Meng Meng nodded seriously. Go give your mama a kiss. Zhang Han waved his hand casually. Okay. Meng Meng approached Xian. Xian was surprised by their cooperation and how obedient Meng Meng was. After being kissed by Meng Meng several times, Xian chuckled. I plan to go to the amusement park the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow is good. Many people recommend Happy Valley. Although there is no Ferris wheel there are similar amusement facilities. It doesn't matter if there's no Ferris wheel, we can play on something else, said Meng Meng expectantly. Meng Meng was very happy because she was going to the amusement park again. There were so many interesting entertainment items in the amusement park, so it didn't matter if there was no Ferris wheel. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, Meng Meng lay down on bed very cleverly and fell asleep listening to Papa's story. At nearly 11 o'clock in the evening, Linji was leaning alone on the reclining chair in front of the window of his house, calling Kiaof. Really, Brother Zhan promised you? Then it's settled. My uncle will go there, and he was just a little weaker than Brother Zhan. The executives of the Dongfeng Hotel are my uncle's friends, and I'm sure he will complete the task tomorrow. It's okay, I believe you, but her young bodyguard had a conflict with me. The beauty of Linhai University was lying on Linji's bed. Though her eyes were closed, she did not fall asleep. She heard Linji's words and knew who he was going to deal with. Who is going to be bullied by them? Alas, sometimes, these top-ranked young masters could do whatever they wanted without any scruples. The next morning, about half of the people went to Happy Valley Amusement Park after breakfast. Wang Zanping and Lutanen didn't go with them because they were not interested in it and would not get any excitement from it. They sincerely admired Zhang Han's patience and love for Meng Meng as a martial arts master. Zhang Han often laughed and cried out when he was having a good time. Although it might be a little exaggerated, he really enjoyed the process of playing. Happiness is contagious. Zhang Li and Zif, who followed Zhang Han, had a good time, and even began to try other exciting rides. A happy time is always very short, and dusk soon came. After having dinner there, they drove to the hotel and returned to their room upstairs at 6 p.m. Before Zhang Han sat down, his cell phone rang in his pocket. The call was from Linji and Zhang Han didn't answer it. Is it their call? Xian asked. Yes. Is Papa going out? Meng Meng raised her head and asked. Yes. Xian patted Meng Meng's head. We agreed in the afternoon that Papa would go out for a while in the evening. I see. Papa, you can go there. Mama and I will wait for you here. Meng Meng waved her small hand. Huh? Zhang Han was very surprised because Meng Meng's attitude was so good this time, but at the same time, he felt a little depressed because he liked to watch Meng Meng act like a spoiled child. Xian leaned over with a smile and whispered in Zhang Han's ear. Zhang Han burst out laughing. Okay, Papa will bring you ice cream. Papa is great. Meng Meng was overjoyed. Don't dress so casually for such a party. Xian looked at Zhang Han's blue coat and thought about it. Then she went to the trunk and took out a pair of black shoes and a black coat. Try these, they will make you look cooler. Zhang Han smiled and changed into the new clothes under the gaze of Xian. I'm going. When Zhang Han went out, he opened the door and saw Rong Jiaxin, Zhang Li, and Zuf, with Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu following them. Boss, I heard that you are going to beat someone up. Do you need my help? asked Instructor Liu. Instructor Liu liked to join in the fun. You can go with me if you want, said Zhang Han. Great, Instructor Liu replied with a smile. Zhao Feng curled his lips. He didn't plan to go, but he had to keep Instructor Liu from causing trouble for Zhang Han. The three of them went downstairs and took a car to the Hantai Entertainment Club. The Hantai Entertainment Club was a relatively high-end club. There were only 4 private rooms on the 6th floor, each of which was large enough to entertain nearly 100 people. When Zhang Han arrived on the 6th floor, Zhang Han didn't know which room the party was being held in. Fortunately, there were several waiters in front of the round hall, so Zhao Feng asked them before they came to greet Zhang Han. Where is Lin Ji? Welcome, child. Lin is in room 01 on the left, one of the waiters pointed and answered. Thank you. Zhao Feng nodded. Then they went to room 01. Just a few steps away, the three of them heard the waiters discussing in a low voice. Did you hear what he said? Lin Ji instead of child Lin. Chapter 622, Kill Them All. When Zhang Han, Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu arrived at Hantai Entertainment Club, 4 cars stopped at the entrance of the Dongfeng Hotel. Bang bang bang. The doors of the cars closed. A man got out of a black Hummer. He looked very conceited, as if he didn't care about anything that was happening around. He could act like that because here is Shang Jing, and he is Xiao Zhan. Many people would tremble upon hearing his name. Xiao Zhan got out of the car, followed by 2 strong men in shirts. They had just gotten out from the back seat. Brother Xiao Zhan, only that guy can call you out, Lin Hui. Xiao Zhan said indifferently. It has been a while since the last time I went out. Lin Hui laughed. He was very humble to Xiao Zhan, because the latter was a Grand Master, which was way higher than the heaven stage that he was in. It takes a lot to arrange a meeting with you. Why don't we eat something first? Lin Hui asked. Xiao Zhan looked at Lin Hui and turned down that proposal. Let's get straight to what we are here for. Lin Hui didn't feel embarrassed at all because he knew that Xiao Zhan was not a good-tempered man. Moreover, whether Xiao Zhan agreed to eat or not had nothing to do with that day's plan at all. Let's go up to the then, Lin Hui said and waved to the other 8 people who just got out of the car. Then he and Xiao Zhan walked to the gate of the hotel. The whole team looked very imposing. Brother Zhan, Xiaoji told me that I only need to deal with the 2 bodyguards this time. I've seen their features in photos. I'm not sure if they are on the upstairs at this moment. I can deal with both of them, so why did Xiao tell you to come here? Lin Hui looked at Xiao Zhan with some confusion. After hearing those words, Xiao Zhan's face froze and said, we need to bring 3 people away, 2 bodyguards and a beautiful girl. A beautiful girl? Lin Hui said with a smile, that's what you're here for? She'd better be pretty enough. Well, her name is Xian and she is really pretty. I may fall for her when I see her. Xiao Zhan nodded and said, who, Xian? Why does the name sound a little familiar to me? Lin Hui asked while he was thinking, then his eyes flashed because he recalled that he had heard the same name 1 or 2 months before. He couldn't remember the exact time. And just when he tried to figure it out, Xiao Zhan answered, she's a star. I also thought the name was familiar when I heard it for the first time. Then Xiao Fei told me that she was a very popular star. A star. Lin Hui burst into laughter. That's right. I must have heard of this name, but I couldn't recall who she was. It turns out you and I do share things in common. Both of us care little about celebrities. That's what young people call breaking away from the social trend. They are so stupid. Ordinary people are also stupid. Only martial artists know what real human life is. Xiao Zhan sneered. Lin Hui's lips twitched when he heard that. He had once discussed the same thing with another Wu Dao Grand Master. That person had confessed that he envied the life of the ordinary people because they had been through ups and downs. Ordinary people's lives usually had a happy ending, while living in the martial arts world was too cruel and ruthless. While he was thinking, the leading one of the 5 suit men at the gate of the hotel greeted them and walked over. Hello child Lin, welcome. Lin Hui looked up and found that it was the executive of the hotel, Wu Peng. "Hello," Lin Hui replied coldly. He then asked, "Is everything ready?" "Yes, all is ready, they're all on the 9th floor," Wu Peng replied respectfully. "Then let's get there," Lin Hui said casually. Other people showed him the way to the elevators. The team got on 3 different elevators and they met on the 9th floor. Wu Peng held several room cards in his hand. He was standing in front of everyone and said, "All the rooms on the left side of the corridor have been booked by them. They paid 10 million yuan as deposit. That's a lot of money. They must be very rich." He was implying that those people should be more careful because the woman was a well-known celebrity and she had many companions. He was also afraid that this would get him in trouble, but he didn't know how to refuse Lin Hui's request without embarrassing him. "She's just an actress." Zhan sneered and seemed very disdainful. Wu Peng smiled bitterly. Given how many people Zhan had brought, it was clear that they were here to make trouble. They stepped into the corridor on the left side. Wu Peng took a look at the room card and said, "They're in room number 6. They passed by the first 3 rooms, and then the 4th room's door was suddenly pushed open right when they were about to pass it. A short-haired and spirited man with single eyelids slowly stepped in their way. That was Xuanhuan. He had a meaningful smile on his face. "You're bringing quite a lot of people." Xuanhuan smiled leisurely. "Who are you looking for?" Seeing Xuanhuan's meaningful smile, Zhan frowned slightly and almost hit him. Lin Hui asked in an unhappy tone, "Who are you? Step aside." "Sorry, we've booked this area. If you're looking for someone, you must be in the wrong place," Xuanhuan said, still with a cheeky smile on his face. "What?" Lin Hui's eyes turned cold and said, "I will kill you." "Ha ha." Xuanhuan laughed and sighed. "It seems that you're here to make trouble." He then stretched out his hands and clapped 3 times. Clap, clap, clap. After that sound, under the gaze of Lin Hui, Zhan, and the other 10 people, all the 5 doors opened at the same time. Many people came out of the rooms. There seemed to be a dozen of them. Lin Hui and Zhan's team were stuck in the middle of the corridor. A fight could start at any second. Wu Peng felt nervous because he would face the consequences if this went out of control. Lin Hui might be able to take part of the responsibility, but Wu Peng was still afraid. After all, he wasn't the owner of the hotel and could be fired because of this. He was unaware that this situation was more complicated than he imagined. On the contrary, Lin Hui and Zhan seemed completely unafraid. All they had on their faces was some unhappiness. "You just gave up your chance to be safe and chose to play fire." Lin Hui sneered. "You'd better get out of here and go as far as you can. What do you think you're doing here, you useless and weak rubbish?" "Really?" Before the others could speak, Xuanhuan curled his lips and asked, "Our boss wife is in the innermost room. I think you know who she is, and you're here up to something. Who sent you here? Give me your name." "I must say, my people are getting very upset." "Go to hell." Xuanhuan's words made Zhan turn ruthless. His body shook and disappeared. When he showed up in front of Xuanhuan, he lifted his right fist and targeted Xuanhuan's chest. He was sure that his powerful punch would definitely kill the man, even though he had only used 30% of his real strength. The little minion had just insulted a Grand Master, and Zhan wanted him to pay for this with his worthless life to teach the others a lesson. Bang! A dull sound echoed in the corridor. I haven't smashed down yet. Zhan thought to himself with his eyes wide open. Then he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He was bent by the strike and flew backward like a shrimp, knocking down many of his followers before he stopped. Those people knocked down by him, including Lin Hui and Wu Peng, were all stunned. Lin Hui was the one most shocked among all. He was roaring to himself, "How did that happen? Did he just kick away a Grand Master? Damn you, Zhan, are you sure you're a Grand Master?" He was so confused, but he realized what had happened very soon. Zhan looked at Xuanhuan in surprise and asked, "Are you also a Grand Master?" "Ha ha." Someone suddenly sneered. A huge pressure took over the whole place. The sudden change made Xiao Zhan's face freeze and Lin Hui tremble in fear. He turned around and saw Tannen walking over step by step, saying, "You're going way out of line today." "That's right. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because Han is not here?" Wang Zanping asked coldly. His aura was rippling. Soon, the aura of Wang Ming, Leng Yixuyong, and Wang Zanzong was surging. Xiao Zhan's face turned livid and scolded. "They're all grandmasters, damn you, Xiao." Xiao Zhan would have killed Xiao if he was there despite their brotherhood. Xiao had pushed him into big trouble this time. Seeing those people approaching, Lin Hui's face turned pale. "No, I am a staff member of the hotel, not." Before Wu Peng could explain. Bang, 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 bang. Dense muffled sounds pervaded in the corridor. Just when the man started screaming, somebody resented the noise and cast a ray of light, which blocked the scream. Concurrently, at the Hantai Entertainment Club, Zhang Han, Zhao Feng, and Instructor Liu arrived at the door of the private room. There were 8 men on both sides of the door. They were Xiao's followers. Donghu, the fat guy, was also there. He was facing the wall, smoking and talking to some woman on the phone. Then Zhang Han suddenly came into their sights. "Gosh!" Donghu exclaimed and hung up the phone. Then he walked over with a hypocritical smile and said, "Brother Han, there you are. We've been waiting for you." As he spoke, Donghu reached out with his right hand. However, instead of also extending his hand, Zhang Han stared at Donghu calmly and thought for a while. Then he smiled meaningfully and asked, "Were you really waiting for me?" He didn't extend his hand in the end. "Of course we were. Child Lin has been waiting for you. Just go in." Donghu retracted his hand involuntarily as he spoke. When Donghu turned around, his lips moved a few times. He was muttering with dissatisfaction. Instructor Liu saw this and said, Young man." He was going to beat Donghu because he was a quick-tempered man and he was there to be Zhang Han's hatchet man in this occasion. Zhang Han would be bothered if he had to teach a lesson to those little minions by himself. But before he finished speaking, Zhao Feng patted him and gave him a hint. Instructor Liu then stopped talking. Donghu turned around to look at Instructor Liu, feeling a little puzzled. This guy is psycho. The interaction of the two was noticed by the cautious eyes of those bodyguards around them. It seemed clear whom they were told to pay attention to. Donghu curled his lips and opened the door to the private room. A melody came out once the door was opened. Someone sitting on the left side of the room was singing. The speaker was not that loud, and the singer was singing fairly well. There were about 12 or 13 girls waiting in a row. Some of them were minor celebrities, and others were campus girls from art and music schools. On the right side of the room, there were 7 sofas and tea tables. People were sitting at the tables and the one facing the left side of the stage was the spot for the host. On the biggest sofa area, there were all kinds of snacks, fruits, and wine on the table. It was unusual that there were fewer people sitting on the spot for the host, when compared to the other sofas. Xiao Zhan, his 2 followers, Linji, the campus girl, and Ma Liang, as well as 5 other people Zhang Han already knew. Linji noticed Zhang Han as soon as he came in. Linji then clapped his hand and announced to everybody, "Attention, everybody, look, Zhang Han, the famous young master in Shangjing City, is here today. He's one of our most important guests tonight. Let's give him a round of applause." He then started applauding. "Ha ha ha, welcome." Donghu screamed and started clapping his hands, too. There were about 50 or 60 people sitting around. Those who were singing also looked over. Most of them were laughing and discussing. "Gosh, Zhang Han is here. He's still so handsome and cool. It's a pity that the party was designed to plot against him tonight. I'm afraid he won't be able to leave this place intact. They are pretending to welcome him, but you know what? Zhang Han used to be one of the 4 young masters, and there was a long and bitter feud between him and Linji. He even snapped Linji's arms once. Now that Zhang Han is down and out, Linji would definitely take this chance to trample on his dignity. Many people present clearly knew about the feud between the two. Their hands were following Linji's cue. But their mouths couldn't stop gossiping. Under many people's gazes, Zhang Han and his people walked towards Linji. "Why are you guys here?" Seeing Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu behind Zhang Han, Qiao's and Liuji's faces changed. They stood up and looked furious. Swish. The room suddenly fell in silence. Even the singers closed their mouths, while the backing music kept on playing. "Do you know each other?" Zhang Han looked at Linji and asked with a smile. How could we not?" Linji sneered and continued, "So you're with them? So what?" Zhang Han hesitated and answered. He was wondering if Linji was referring to Xian's bodyguards. At this moment, a strong man that was about 1.75 meters tall stood up with a glass of red wine in his hand and toasted, "Zhang Han, a glass of wine with you is all that I am here for today. Ma Sanman." Zhang Han craned his neck and saw Ma Sanman, who was then a martial artist practicing inward strength. "I found what happened between us is actually funny to look back to. I don't know how you feel about it, but I do miss the good old days. I think you are way better than those hypocrites. I admired you. Would you like to have a cup of wine with me? If not, I'll just leave," said Ma Sanman and smiled casually. By saying that, he was also trying to ridicule Linji. Qiao and Linji stopped talking and were thinking about something. Having heard what Ma Sanman said, Zhang Han picked up a random glass of red wine on the table. He then looked at Ma Sanman and drank up the wine with him. "Ha, that's perfect." Ma Sanman laughed loudly and continued, "You'll have to handle this dinner party by yourself from now on. I have to leave because I still have other things to deal with," Ma Sanman said and left without looking back. Even Instructor Liu was impressed. He exclaimed, "That's a cool man." After he left, Linji and Qiao looked at each other. Qiao didn't take it out on other people immediately because the two were both martial experts and they had professional bodyguards. He was waiting for his brother to come back so that he could vent his anger. He quickly calmed himself down and sat back after he gave a hint to Linji. Linji read that signal and found it was exactly what he was thinking. He put on a forced smile and said, "We were overreacting upon seeing the two friends behind you, but this is a party and we should leave those unhappy memories to be dealt with later." Before he finished speaking, Linji saw Zhang Han and the other two casually sitting on the sofa, so he quickly added, "Please take a seat, Mr. Zhang." He was trying to take the initiative. He was one of those who took the initiative to attack. However, no matter how hard he tried, the other people present could still tell what was happening. It turned out that Zhang Han didn't care about Linji and Qiao Zhan at all. All of them wondered how Zhang Han was making a living at the moment, and his two followers seemed very powerful. Everyone was confused. Linji smiled and asked, "Zhang Han, you used to be one of the 4 young masters in Shangjing. Why are you working as a bodyguard now? That's so not you." The moment those words were out of his mouth, many people present were stunned, and then they burst into an uproar. Some of them were discussing, "What? A bodyguard? No way." Child Zhang had fallen so low. "Really? I don't believe it. It's so funny. He used to be so powerful. I don't think he would be willing to be a bodyguard no matter how broke he was." This discussion made Linji smile. Zhang Han smiled calmly and replied, "I'm actually a bodyguard, to some extent." Seeing Zhang Han's expression, Linji decided not to beat around the bush anymore. "Ha, Zhang Han, you're still as disgusting as you used to be. You're only a bodyguard now. Who do you think you're talking to? The master you protect will come here later and sing the song we wanted her to sing. Would you believe that?" said Linji with a proud smile. He was one of those who had been referred to as the hypocrites. "Not just singing," Qiao Feng added disdainfully. "I can do whatever I want as long as she's here, and so are you." 4 strong men in black came over and stood behind Qiao's back. He didn't want to put on an act anymore. He was Qiao, the most influential young master in Shangjing. He had never been beaten and bullied by someone else before. He had never forgiven any of his opponents. He had invited Xiao Zhan over to support him. Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu, who had messed up with him at noon, were already dead to him by then. Xiao was no fool. His people would be no match for Zhang Han just then, so before his bodyguards came in, he held in his grudge, but he didn't have to anymore. "Are you referring to Xian?" Zhang Han asked. His eyes checked Linji and Xiao. Who else would it be? Linji asked and shook his head. "You'll watch a big show later. You can help yourself before that." Xiaomai, serve child Zhang nicely. Linji then patted the woman's waist. Xiaomai was a little reluctant, but she still stood up. Seeing her unwillingness to move, Instructor Liu said, "Get lost. We're not like you. We don't have to be accompanied by a woman." Seeing Zhang Han checking his phone, Instructor Liu knew it was the time for him to act. "Oh?" Linji raised his eyebrows and asked, "Who are you to speak to me like that?" "Let him talk." Xiao cast a cold glance and said, "They don't have much time left." His words were supposed to be murderous, but Instructor Liu couldn't help laughing because of it. "What's so funny?" Linji asked. "You'll know what will happen once our seniors bring her here." Linji and Xiao were sure that they would bring her in less than half an hour. Zhang Han's cold voice resounded right at that moment. "You mean these two people?" Xiao, Linji, and the silent Ma Liang looked over. Zhang Han held the phone to them and the screen showed a place somewhere in the corridor. Many people were on their knees. The two in the front of the team were ones that seemed the most awkward. Xiao and Linji stood up agape. They exclaimed, "Uncle, big brother." And it seemed that this wasn't over yet. A cold voice came out of the phone. "How should we get rid of these people?" Zhang Han's cold voice resounded again. "Kill them all." Kaboom! The three words were like an unexpected thunderstrike to Xiao and Liuji. They were all dumbfounded. Chapter 623, Game of Life and Death. What's going on? Xiao still couldn't believe that his formidable brother, Xiao Zhan, was there on his knees, tortured by his opponent. How is this possible? Linji shared the same thoughts with Xiao. They couldn't believe what had happened. He thought Xian was no more than an actress. The last time she came, she wasn't able to protect herself. Xiao could have raped her if he wanted. However, he liked to pursue and play with women. He enjoyed conquering women with his strategy. He never thought that the woman would ask Zhao Feng for help before he could play with her, and that made him lose. He lost it suddenly and unexpectedly, because he had never thought so many powerful people would interfere. And this time, it was still Xian. They currently had Xiao Zhan and Lin Hui's support, but the two seemed to have been beaten as well. He couldn't believe this was real. Many people couldn't believe their eyes. They suddenly felt cold because the background of the video seemed to be the corridor of the hotel. So many people were kneeling there, and it looked so real. After Zhang Han said those three words, the screen flashed, and then Zhang Han hung up the video call. But other people couldn't get the scene out of their minds. Xiao and Linji were really scared. They invited Xiao Zhan and Lin Hui there, because Xiao Zhan was the hope of the Xiao clan's rejuvenation, and Lin Hui was believed to have the chance to become a Grand Master in 3 years. They wondered if the two still had the chance to come back alive. "No, that's impossible, I don't believe it." Xiao's body went limp and he collapsed on the sofa. His face was pale and cold sweat was dripping down his face. Linji's eyes were wide open. He still needed some time to process and to accept what just happened. He was thinking whether this could be fake, but he couldn't come up with any possibilities. The video call didn't seem fake at all. Not just the two of them. Those beside Xiao, the beautiful girl sitting next to Linji, and Ma Liang, the rich man from a Linhai city, were all shocked. "Kill them all." The three cold and calm words made him felt stunningly cold, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Zhang Han said it so casually, as if he were asking someone to kill a chicken. Some of the people present didn't hear it clearly, but they had seen Xiao and Linji's astonished faces. They were confused after seeing how the two were reacting. Some people had heard the 3 words, but they couldn't stop asking each other, "Did you hear what he said? Did he just say kill? Why are they collapsing on the sofa? Why do Child Kiao and Child Lin seem to be paralyzed? Are they scared? Unbelievable." They were all shocked. Upon their first glance at Zhang Han, they thought Linji would trample on his dignity. However, within 5 minutes, Linji and Kiao both slumped on the sofa. That was a little scary. After all, the two used to be 2 of the most influential young masters. Donghu was the most frightened one at this moment. He sat on the edge of the sofa, looking at Zhang Han, who remained calm. He couldn't get the 3 words out of his mind. Hiss. Donghu shivered and didn't feel very well. Zhang Han was no longer the sore-head guy he used to be. Donghu suddenly remembered the strange smile hanging on Zhang Han's mouth when they were racing in Mount Lang Crossing. That was exactly the same smile he had on his mouth right then. Donghu wondered if Zhang Han was going to win again this time, even if it was Xiao Zhan the one he was facing. Those singers stopped singing altogether. They gathered and discussed, knowing their work for the night had ended. The man in charge of the control panel even turned off the backing tracks of the song. The whole room was so quiet that people could hear the slightest things dropping on the ground. Nobody dared to talk. They were all looking at what was going on among Zhang Han and the others. Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu stood up and walked to the door. They looked around with their grim eyes and seemed to be ready to fight. They had all known before that even if Zhang Han came to the party in person, these people still had a chance to survive, although the chance could be quite slim. But when they decided to attack those people in the hotel, they had already made an announcement. That was why the 2 of them made their moves. Seeing their actions, Kiao seemed to have realized something. His face was twisted out of anger. He pointed at Zhang Han and shouted, "Go, go, kill him." Phew! Those strong bodyguards behind him turned grim and rushed over to Zhang Han. Hiss! Many people gasped. The fight began. Under many people's nervous gazes, the poker face man moved and confronted Kiao's bodyguards. Clatter, 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 clatter. The sound of snapping bones came. Before everyone could see where those strong bodyguards had been struck, their bodies softened and their eyes rolled. No one knew whether they were dead or alive. What? People were stunned by what they just saw. They never thought that Zhang Han's followers could be this powerful. Many people's faces changed and the 2 words slipped out of their mouths, martial artist. Only martial artists could be so powerful. Are Kiao and Linji going to lose today? Many people thought that the powerful man would make another move, but he walked slowly back after he clapped his hand. Those people couldn't move their eyes away from Zhang Han's face. The young man still seemed carefree, with a relaxed smile on his face which looked more like a mocking gesture. How should I deal with you guys? Zhang Han glanced at Linji, Kiao, and Donghu. Gulp. Linji swallowed and braced himself to say, "What do you want? We invited you here only to talk about our good old days." Linji seemed to have recovered a little. He thought for a moment and continued, "I don't know what your video call was for, but if that was real, you'd better stop it now." "Stop?" Zhang Han laughed out. Then he shook his head with a relaxed smile and looked at Linji, saying, "Fine, I'll give you a chance. It's 7:20 p.m. now and I still have time for some games with you." Everyone thought Zhang Han was really going to play some party games first, but this would only make his next words shock them even more. The game will begin before 9 p.m., and only the winner can survive, Zhang Han said. What? A game of life and death? Many people were stunned and confused. The winner gets to survive? Zhang Han, you are so arrogant. Kiao gritted his teeth and stood up. Then he yelled, "You're not as powerful as you think, and this is Shang Jing. Don't you dare touch me, or I swear you'll never be able to leave here alive. Sit down." Zhang Han shook his head and waved his right hand calmly. Bang! Kiao felt a strong pressure fall on him, forcing him to sit back. What? Kiaof was so frightened because an idea just crossed his mind. He looked at Zhang Han and called out, "You are a Grand Master?" Those words were like a tossed stone that created 1,000 ripples. Those who knew what that title meant were all shocked by the invisible pressure. They stared at Zhang Han in fear. "Are you kidding me?" Lin Ji was also frightened by Kiaof's question. He wanted to stand up and say something, only to find that he couldn't move his body. This feeling was the answer to Kiaof's question. Lin Ji was extremely scared. Donghu also shared their feelings. It had taken Donghu a long time before he realized what was really going on. Before that, he thought he was unable to move his body just because he was too scared. "The game is very simple," said Zhang Han after he thought for a moment. Then he raised his right hand. Whoosh! A herb popped out and was immediately shattered into some light green mist. "This is a poisonous herb, and I'll show you how dangerous it can be." As soon as he finished speaking, 1/3 of the mist fell down on a fruit plate. Rustling. People could see the fruits on it darkening and rotting. 1 second, 2 seconds. Within 3 seconds, all the fruits in the plate decomposed into some black stains. "What are you doing?" Kiaof and Lin Ji were so nervous because they could assume what Zhang Han was going to do. Their faces turned pale out of fear. Seeing this creepy scene, the beautiful girl sitting next to Lin Ji screamed. She didn't want to stay there any longer. She stood up and tried to run away, only to find the creeping monster on her right side. She climbed over to the back of the sofa. When she landed on the floor, she twisted her ankle. She then took off her high heels and ran to the place where the most people were gathered. Ma Liang didn't care about Lin Ji anymore because his own life mattered the most. He followed the beautiful girl and rushed over to the crowd. When Kiaof's followers saw this, run. In only a few seconds, there were only 4 people left on the sofa. Zhang Han, Kiaof, and the other 2 people who couldn't move. Zhang Han ignored those people. He activated his soul sense and 2 more herbs popped out. They then turned into clouds of mist that converged together. At last, they became a black gas. Under the 3 people's horrified gazes, the gas was divided into 3 strands and dissolved in the red wine in front of the 3. It was getting creepier. As the black gas dissolved, the red wine became as transparent as water. The others were trembling because they had no idea what poison had been mixed in this water-like liquid. "Take a sip," Zhang Han said as he looked at Lin Ji and the other 2. Then he smiled and made a pleased gesture with his right hand. Then, under the confused gazes of the people around them, the 3 slowly picked up their glasses and drank up the wine. "That's fierce. Did they just drink all of it?" They go on undeterred by the dangers ahead. Everyone was confused because they didn't know what had been driving the 3 to do that. Neither could they move, nor could they control their own bodies. To drink it or not wasn't their own decision to make. After they finished the 3 glasses, they heard Zhang Han's faint voice. "You're right. The wine is poisonous. The 3 of you only have 90 minutes to call your backers for help. I'll give the antidote to the one whose backer is powerful enough to beat me. Oh, by the way, Donghu doesn't seem to have a supporter. Then I'll just boost the effects of the poison in him so you know what you'll face." Zhang Han nodded his head. In an instant, Kiaof, Lin Ji, and Donghu felt their bodies being lifted. Kiaof and Lin Ji stood up immediately and looked at Donghu. "No!" Donghu screamed and stood up, only to find that he was fine. He then laughed out loud and said, "Ha ha, I'm fine. He's lying, ha, ha." Before he finished speaking, his expression suddenly froze. He turned grey from head to toe, standing there like a stone. Within just 5 seconds, Donghu was turned into a stone. After a gentle breeze, Zhang Han's subordinate, Donghu, collapsed into ashes. Hiss. Ah! Run! All the people around them were scared out of their wits. They stood up and wanted to run away. Zhao Feng, the poker face, was checking around and trying to hide. He squeezed into the crowd like a frozen chicken in winter. Well, Kiaof and Sumo's faces turned pale. They were too shocked by what they saw. Lin Ji reacted quickly. He didn't care much about Kiaof at this moment, he only wanted to protect himself. He took out his mobile phone with a trembling hand and dialed a number. "Uncle Bo, something happened to me, please come and save me. I'm in room 601 of the Hantai Entertainment Club." Kiaof realized what he should do, too. He knew the Uncle Bo Linji had just spoken with. The man was the only military general of the Lin clan. Even a Wu Dao Grand Master wouldn't dare to fight against him. Kiaof thought for a moment, then he took out his phone and dialed a number. "Uncle Hu, it's Kiaof, I'm in trouble now and it's a matter of life and death. I'm not joking, one of us just got killed. We're in room 601 of Hantai Entertainment." After the two phone calls, the two people sat weakly on the sofa. They lowered their heads and kept silent. Neither of them dared to look at Zhang Han because they were afraid of being killed for no reason like Dong Hu. Many people in the crowd closest to them heard the two make phone calls. They suddenly felt hopeful knowing somebody would come to rescue them. Child Kiao and Child Lin's backers will definitely take down that devil. We'll get out of here safe and sound. We'll be safe. The two clans will work together. No one is able to fight against two clans alone. All of them were waiting anxiously. Zhao Feng was standing at the door. He thought for a moment and walked back. Then he stood in front of Zhang Han in peace. Within 10 minutes, bam, the door of the room opened. A group of people armed with real loaded guns stormed in. The leading one was a grim-faced man in his 30s. Lin Ji stood up excitedly when he saw the man. "Fourth brother." The man looked at him and checked around. He indeed had found something wrong, but he wasn't sure if it was about Zhang Han, so he asked in a low voice, "Who did this?" Lin Ji stood up and ran to the man. He pointed to Zhang Han and answered, "It's him. He gave us poisonous drinks. He's a Grand Master." The man's expression paused. He looked at Lin Ji with resentful eyes. He wished Lin Ji had told him that the opponent was a Grand Master. If he had been told this earlier, he could have prepared some explosive weapons. At the moment he only had 20 people with pistols which might not do any harm to a Grand Master. "Who are you?" Since he knew he couldn't beat the opponent, he would try to negotiate. He took 2 steps forward and asked, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? I remember that there's a general named Lin Bo in the Lin clan, right? Why didn't he show up?" Zhang Han directly asked. "What did you say?" The man frowned and said, "Be respectful or you will regret it. With all due respect, this is no place for you to act wildly, no matter if you're a Grand Master or not. That's bullshit." Instructor Liu interrupted him and walked over. He poked the man on his chest, saying, "Be respectful to the general. You don't know who the man sitting there is? Let me tell you. You shall call him General Zhang." His words made the crowd burst into an uproar. The guy is a psycho. He looked too young to be a general. It's impossible. The man said and stared coldly at Zhang Han. He then took a step back. "Check out what this is." Instructor Liu took a black badge out of his pocket. The wolf head detachment. The man's face changed slightly. Lin Ji and Kiao felt their hearts had skipped a beat upon seeing that. Oh no, is he really a general? The man thought for 5 seconds. Then he looked at Zhang Han and said, "We'll see about that. The general from our clan will talk to you. But you have to hand Lin Ji over to me first." "Give him to you." Zhang Han shook his head and refused. "I won't give him to you even if you were the general." His words provoked the man. He suddenly laughed out of anger. "I found that you're really..." Bang! Instructor Liu kicked him away before he finished that sentence. The squad of 20 or more raised their guns when they saw that. "Get out of here." Zhang Han waved his left hand and lifted those people in the air. Then he shoved them toward the door like a flood streaming. And they never came back. Lin Ji's backer was gone. Many people were stunned. Those who thought they had been rescued were then more than disappointed. Damn, he is a real devil. Lin Ji was dumbfounded. He wondered if this was the Zhang Han he used to know and how he managed to become a general. He didn't know what to do. Kiao was still confident. However, as the saying goes, Misfortunes never come alone. Soon, another team got into the room. The 5 people were led by a strong hairy man. Uncle Hu. Kiaof bounced off the sofa and took 2 steps forward, but he didn't dare to get any closer. Who made this mess? How dare you touch? Puff. When Uncle Hu saw Zhang Han's face, he almost puked blood. The others were bewildered. Uncle Hu jumped forward like a tiger out of its cage. Everyone thought he was acting promptly and was going to attack Zhang Han like thunder. However, to everyone's surprise, he seemed to have stumbled and lost balance. Then he kneeled on the ground and slid forward for 3 meters. That stunned all the people present. Later they knew that this wasn't an accident. Uncle Hu greeted Zhang Han in a miserable voice. Hail to Grandmaster Zhang, please forgive me for my offensive language. Please don't kill me. Bang! That scene struck Kiaof like thunder. Chapter 624, A Dumbfounded Backer. Uncle Hu. Kiaof's face froze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Uncle Hu had a solid background. He was a Grand Master as well as a high-level official of the National Security Agency. Last time he visited the Kiao clan, the patriarch welcomed him with full respect and manners. This bigwig had just knelt before Zhang Han without hesitation. Why? However, this was just the beginning. Uncle Hu's followers' foreheads were also leaking sweat when they saw Zhang Han. They looked at each other and saw the fear in their eyes. That man is merciless, Zhang. What do we do now? Although they didn't say anything when they first came in, they knew Zhang Han could tell that they were with Uncle Hu, who was already kneeling. They thought of those powerhouses from the Li clan in Hong Kong. They were also once ranked at the top of the list of the most influential clans, but all of them had been exterminated. That made people shudder. They hesitated for 2 seconds and suddenly rushed forward. That made them look like football players after scoring a goal in the World Cup. Slip. All of them slipped towards Uncle Hu. Please spare us, Grandmaster Zhang. Bang. Kiaof stumbled and felt desperate beyond words. Their attitude had just convinced Kiaof that Zhan had been killed. He called his brother many times, only to be told that the phone had been turned off. He was completely stunned after having seen the horrifying and confusing scene happening there. I just provoked a monster. The whole room fell into a dead silence. Almost everyone held their breath, except Zhang Han. He looked at those people kneeling on the ground and asked calmly, "Do we know each other?" Zhang Han wouldn't ask the question if he were in Hong Kong because he had been well known there. However, he didn't go to the north very often, and he had only been to the northeast only once. He had not returned to Shangjing in a while. Lots of people were familiar with his name, but few of them were supposed to recognize him at first glance. That was why he asked the question. Uncle Hu seemed nervous upon hearing that question. He cupped his hands and answered, "I had a mission in Ice City once, and I was lucky to have met Grandmaster Zhang. You're a person of great power and talent. I admire you very much." He was trying his best to flatter Zhang Han. The young man was too temperamental. One mistake would cost his life. They had learned enough lessons previously, and they didn't want to be the next lesson in other people's textbooks. He ran into Zhang Han Yang last time he went to help somebody. Zhang Han Yang was provoked and he killed the man in an instant. That was not what he wanted. He was willing to kneel down to beg for mercy. He was being as humble as he could, although he could call Azure Dragon over at any time. The guy was his supervisor in the National Security Agency. However, Azure Dragon might not be able to help him, either. The captain of the Azure Dragon detachment was a peak Grandmaster, but that was no threat to Zhang Han Yang. Azure Dragon was not an even match for Zhang Han Yang. The teammates behind Uncle Hu also understood this, so they immediately knelt down and also begged for mercy. Zhang Han's casual question and faint smile made them anxious. Their hearts were jumping in their throats. Fortunately, after Uncle Hu answered that question, Zhang Han nodded and waved his hand, saying, "You can leave now." "Yes." Uncle Hu's eyes lit up and he said something that almost made Kiaof collapse to the ground. "Thanks for not killing me, Grandmaster Zhang. Zhang Han found that funny. Just get out of here. I'm not sure if he will change his mind later. Instructor Liu snorted. Yes, let's go, now. Uncle Hu left with his followers without looking back. He paused for a second when they passed by Kiaof, then he sighed with a troubled expression in his eyes. You deserve this, don't get other people involved. I'm done with this, you should deal with this on your own. He didn't know exactly what had happened, but he knew Zhang Han Yang was stalling for time so that Kiaof would call more people over. Zhang Han Yang wasn't going after Kiaof, he wanted to kill more. Given his connection with the Kiao clan, Uncle Hu felt that he had to remind Kiaof. Since he had kindly reminded Kiaof, he would leave the young master to make his own choice, and Uncle Hu would no longer be accountable for this. He didn't want to get involved in this at all. As soon as he finished speaking, he took the lead and walked straight out. As the door opened, he saw more people in the round hall outside, including those armored men, the managers of the hotel, and some police officers. I'll report this to my superiors. You don't want to get involved in this, you can leave now, said Uncle Hu after some consideration. It was useless for those people to be there. Uncle Hu knew that the only one that could make a difference was Vermilion Bird, the only one who had a connection with Zhang Han Yang. He was pressed for time, so he took out his phone and dialed Vermilion Bird's number. Captain Vermilion Bird, this is Ning Hu, you're still on holiday? I'm sorry, I'll talk to Captain Azure Dragon. Ah, okay, then please listen to me. Ning Hu was a little nervous, judging from the background noise. She seemed to be having fun at a party. He didn't think this was a good time to tell her that. However, it seemed that he had run out of options. He smiled bitterly and said, please don't blame me, this is very tricky. Zhang Han Yang was provoked. He is now furious because of actions of the Kiao clan and the Lin clan. Kiaof and Kiaoji were in the club, and Zhang Han Yang gave them some time to call over their backers. The two had no way to vent Zhang Han Yang's anger. Captain, please come and take a look, or the entire city will be affected. Just as he finished speaking, the one on the other side of the phone called out, what did you say? Then her voice sounded sulky as she commanded. Give me the address. Hantai Entertainment Club, Ning Hua muttered. Obviously, the woman was angry because this ruined her vacation. Louder. Hiss. Ning Hu quivered and raised his voice. Hantai Entertainment Club, room number 601. Pa. The phone was hung up. Ning Hu stood there helplessly. He looked back at the room peacefully. 5 seconds later, he shook his head and said to himself, I've done everything I can. I'm not the one to blame no matter the outcome. Jiang Yanlan was singing and playing with a few of her friends from college in a karaoke at the eastern district of Shangjing. She wanted to have a normal vacation like other ordinary people would do, but she didn't enjoy it for long after hearing such news. Jiang Yanlan was so angry that she gritted her teeth and complained for quite a while, then she turned around with a sorry face and apologized to her friends. I'm sorry, it's a family emergency, I have to go back. She drank up a glass of wine as an apology and then said goodbye to her friends one by one. Then she got on a low-key blue Volkswagen Beetle. Her face turned grim. She reached out her right hand and pressed a circular button in a hidden position under the wheel. Then she hit the gas. Vroom! An air explosion rippled and rose into the sky. Whoosh! The car rushed away like flying. She didn't care about the traffic lights because her way to the club was long and she was pressed for time. Zhang Han Yang, why is it you again? Why do you always make trouble for me? You're such a pain in the neck. In room number 601 of Hantai Entertainment Club, Zhang Han, Instructor Liu, and Zhao Feng seemed very relaxed, while the others felt quite tense. The people in the room didn't even dare to take a breath. They had completely understood that Kiaof and Linji were in some serious trouble which seemed impossible to deal with. They couldn't help thinking of how Donghu was turned into a piece of stone. They wondered what kind of poison could be that scary. Will Linji and Kiaof be turned into stone too when the time is up? Everyone was thinking about that issue, including the two people who took the poison. Grandmaster Zhang, I never offended you before. Every debt has its owner. If Linji has offended you, just kill him. I have nothing to do with him," said Qiaof with a pale face. Linji was nothing when compared to matters of life and death. "It doesn't matter. Have you forgotten how Qiaozan died?" Zhang Han looked at him coldly and said, "He plotted against her. I bet he didn't know who her husband is. I wouldn't mind exterminating the whole Qiao clan for that." "Are you referring to Ziyan?" Linji's face paled again. He staggered and took 2 steps back, murmuring, "Why, how could this be? No, you can't kill me." Qianf seemed to have lost his mind. He roared to Zhang Han, "I'm the eldest son of the Qiao clan. My family has Emperor King as our backer. It's Emperor King. You can't kill me. If you do, Emperor King will make you suffer." "Really?" Zhang Han looked at the two and waved his hand calmly. "Did you forget the time? You still have 40 minutes. As Zhang Han waved his hand, clatter, the two's faces suddenly changed. They lowered their heads, only to see that their feet had been turned into stone in just 2 seconds. They couldn't feel their feet, as if they had gone numb, or struck by some magic. The creepy grey color was crawling from their feet to their legs. It was going slowly but with an unstoppable momentum. They were scared senseless. "You still have time to find your backer." Zhao Feng sneered, "Maybe you should call Emperor King over." Qiaof and Linji were in such a panic that they took out their phones immediately and dialed their patriarch's numbers, leaving all their scruples behind. The Qiao clan and the Lin clan were both shocked. They inquired other people and were dumbfounded when they heard from Ninghu that it was Zhang Han Yang. As time went by, 20 minutes later, the two's thighs had been turned into stone. They were horrified and desperate. Right at this moment, whoosh! Someone quickly came in from the gate. People gazed over and saw a woman in a tight suit. It was Jiang Yanlan. Her face changed slightly when she saw the two half-stone half-men. She trotted to Zhang Han and sighed. "Can you stop that?" "No." Zhang Han refused her directly. "Can you show some mercy?" "No." "All right then." Jiang Yanlan let out a sigh of relief. "I have to remind you that the Qiao clan has sent someone to Mount Redleaf, the place where Emperor King is cultivating in seclusion." Chapter 625, Emperor King out of seclusion. The Mount Redleaf was located in the middle of the Jianyun Mountains in the southern suburbs of Shangjing City. The mountain peak was a blessed place with rich spiritual qi. As for Mount Redleaf, it was a special place for Emperor King to cultivate in seclusion. He had been living there since the time he obtained treasures abroad. He didn't tell anyone about the seclusion, but everybody knew that this particular seclusion was extremely important to him. The next time he showed up, he would be in the divine realm. Emperor King was the first one among all to have reached that realm, earlier than Devil Incarnate Yilong Yuan, Little Rock Shi Fenu, Zhang Han Yang, and Mugs, the female demon who had a strong background. If he managed to take one step ahead, he would always have the priority for everything. Emperor King's era would last. Jiang Yanlan had high expectations of Zhang Han Yang, and she didn't want any risky confrontations to arise between the two. She wouldn't be worried too much if Zhang Han Yang was just trying to challenge Emperor King. However, should either of them die in the challenge, the Wu-Dao world in this country would suffer a great loss. There were plenty of martial artists in the Hua nation, but few of them were as powerful as Emperor King and Zhang Han Yang. The world needed them to defend it from the invasion of sects from other worldlets. The National Security Agency was influential enough, but it was still weaker than those big sects. Jiang Yanlan's words surprised many people. They didn't expect Emperor King to get involved in today's incident, which would make it the top-level duel in Shangjing City. Who on earth is the man sitting there? Grandmaster Zhang. Is he really Zhang Han Yang? Many people were too frightened to believe that. Fear had clung to their backbones. If he was really the Zhang Han Yang they knew from the past, he must have made some formidable progress. They gazed into the man's eyes, trembling in fear. Qiaof and Linji found hope again. They stared at Zhang Han eagerly. hoping to read fear on that face. To their surprise, their old acquaintance Zhang Han smiled lightly and said peacefully, "You want me to surmount Mountain Redleaf?" Jiang Yanlan seemed upset when she heard that. She sighed and said, "Why didn't you contact me? You're driving me crazy." "Hey, gorgeous, just be patient," Instructor Liu said. He called her gorgeous because he didn't know how powerful she was. He thought she was just an ordinary civil servant, and he had no idea that she had already reached the peak of Grandmaster Realm. He laughed and said, "Mr. Zhang can even kill a man in the Divine Realm. Even if Emperor King made a breakthrough, he wouldn't dare to come here." Jiang Yanlan hesitated upon hearing that. No one had called her that ever since she joined the Vermilion Bird detachment. She was currently the captain of the detachment, and Instructor Liu's tone was too disrespectful. "What do you know?" Jiang Yanlan scolded him and pressed forward with her right hand. An invisible airwave palm went straight toward Instructor Liu. "Ah?" Instructor Liu was startled. Feeling the overwhelming power, he screamed, "Mr. Zhang, help!" But Zhang Han ignored him. He wasn't abandoning him. Jiang Yanlan's attack wasn't very powerful, and she had controlled it in a subtle way. Instructor Liu was slapped 10 meters away after he tried his best to block the attack. Then he fell into a flower pot. "Ouch!" Instructor Liu stood up, hands covering his butt. He exclaimed, "The gorgeous girl is way more powerful than me. Humphrey, I can still teach you a lesson even if you have him as your backer," said Jiang Yanlan. She was glaring at Instructor Liu. "Yes, you're right, you're always right." Instructor Liu patted his butt and laughed embarrassedly. He knew his boss wouldn't help him, even if the woman beat him again. Obviously, they were acquaintances. "You." Jiang Yanlan raised her right hand and was going to hit him again. But she took back her hand and looked at Zhang Han. Then she said in a sulking tone, "Then I'll leave you alone." She quickly took a seat on the sofa and picked up a glass of red wine. Qiaof and Linji were desperate upon seeing this. Their waist had already been turned into stone, which made them feel utterly depressed and desperate. They even felt that their minds had been slowed down. Right at this moment, a group of people flooded in through the door. There were about 16 or 17 people. Half of them were from the Qiao clan, and the others were from the Lin clan. The Lin clan was still trying to find backers when they were told by the Qiao clan that the opponent was Zhang Han Yang. The Lin family all of a sudden felt hopeless and didn't know what to do. They later heard that the Qiao clan flew a helicopter to Mount Redleaf, so they gathered a few people and visited the Qiao clan. The Qiao clan would have been as panicked as the Lin clan if they didn't have Emperor King as their backer. At the same time, the news began to spread. The Zhang clan and the Liu clan had been keeping an eye on Zhang Han, therefore, they were the first to know what happened. The members of their family were gathering. There were 15 or 16 of them from the Zhang clan and 5 or 6 of them from the Liu clan. They kept receiving news from the front line. Zhang Han went to the Han Tai Club for the appointment. Xiao Zhan has gone to the Dongfeng Hotel. He hasn't come out yet. Zhang Han went to the private room. What the hell? He killed Donghu so soon. I'm scared. Should I flee? Oh my god, he poisoned Qiaof and Linji. Some officials arrived. I don't why they showed up, but they were ushered out of the room. I can't believe this. Zhang Han is a general. Ning who is here. He's a high-level official of the National Security Agency. He knelt down and begged for mercy. Then he left in embarrassment. The captain of the Vermilion Bird detachment, Jiang Yanlan, is there. She couldn't stop Zhang Han, either. She's now sitting next to him and drinking wine. Damn, Qiaof's and Linji's bodies are going to turn into stone. The shocking news kept coming in. The people from the Zhang clan had a troubled mood because of them. At the moment, they wished Zhang Han would lose, because otherwise, the Zhang clan would have to pay millions in compensation to the other two clans. They were also regretful because the tough guy used to be one of them. If Zhang Han were still in the clan, they would have had the chance to be the most influential clan among all in Shangjing. They knew they couldn't always get what they wanted. They had never thought that the once useless playboy would become this fierce one day. I feel as if we lifted a rock only to drop it on our own feet, and Zhang Han is definitely a hard rock. Zhang Nan sighed. Today is the second day and tomorrow is the last day. We should get the money ready no matter how. Other people were all moved and they exclaimed, do we really have to give away 10 billion yuan? I don't want to do that. Will he destroy our family if we don't give him the money? Asked someone in an angry tone. Most of them were calm, and they gave others the final answer, yes, he will. It was not easy to raise 10 billion yuan without preparation. The Zhang clan was still sitting on the fence. As for the Liu clan, they were present just to enjoy the big show. Whether they would fight or not had nothing to do with the Liu clan, they were pure onlookers. The news spread slowly, and many people were stunned upon hearing it. Zhang Han Yang was back. The news spread fast like a storm. The Kiao and Lin clans felt much pressure because their people were in that private room. Their patriarchs and important members weren't there to rescue the two because it was merciless Zhang the one they would be facing. They only sent representatives to speak on their behalf. Kiao Yongming, head of the representatives from the Kiao clan, saw Kiao and Linji. The parts below the two's necks had already been turned into stone, and they were about to lose consciousness. Although he had seen enough tricks from different martial artists, he was still startled when he saw this. He was inwardly horrified, but he showed a calm front. Kiao Yongming took a deep breath and glanced at his family members who didn't dare to say anything. He looked at Zhang Han and said in a deep voice, Mr. Zhang, we respect you very much. Perhaps one of our kids has offended you, and our clan would be glad to punish him for you, so would you please stop turning him into stone? So, how will you punish him for me? How about giving me a divine weapon as an apology? Zhang Han said with a faint smile. A divine weapon? Kiao Yongming's face froze. He was angry and answered, you're going way out of line. My clan and my people are not pushovers. They had heard the story more or less. They knew Kiao Zhan had gone to the Dongfeng hotel where Ziyan was staying in, and Kiao Zhan had never come out ever since. He must have died there. They clearly knew who could kill Kiao Zhan that easily. He was there to solve the problem. They hadn't even blamed Zhang Han for Kiao Zhan's death, and they begged Zhang Han to let go of Kiao. They had been humble enough even for their clan's proud nature. Kiao Yongming had two plans for this. Plan A, they wouldn't offer any treasures because Emperor King would come to rescue. Plan B, they would threaten Zhang Han that Emperor King was coming out of seclusion. But before Kiao Yongming finished speaking, bam, a muffled sound came from his position. Other people could only see a flash. Later, the man standing there turned into a light mist and faded away. Hiss. Everyone present gasped. They were all pale because they were too frightened. Then they all looked at Zhang Han's indifferent face. He said as he walked toward the gate, the Kiao clan? Who do you think you are to put on airs like that? Zhao Feng and Instructor Liu were following him closely. Jiang Yanlan sighed helplessly. The Kiao clan was well aware of Zhang Han Yang's temper. They didn't really have to do that. Kiao Yongming looked like such a fool to her. He was there because the Kiao clan had contacted Emperor King. Kiao Yongming should have just told Zhang Han about that. The man should have either surrendered or just told Zhang Han Yang the truth. The guy was really stupid to put on airs like that. As she thought about that, she stood up and tried to catch up with Zhang Han. Then she gave a hint to those from the Kiao clan and the Lin clan. Just cut the crap. Those people suddenly stopped talking, because Zhan Han was standing in front of them, glancing at them calmly. They could barely breathe under the pressure. Fortunately, Zhang Han didn't do anything to them. He passed by them and walked towards the gate. Phew. The crowd breathed a sigh of relief. They didn't notice that as Zhang Han passed by, Kiao and Linji had been completely turned into stone statues. Their eyes were all on Zhang Han as he walked out of the door. Wait. A man from the Kiao clan yelled out with courage. He was soaked in cold sweat. I'm here to bring Emperor King's message to you, that if you don't stop now, He'll have a fight with you in the north of Jianyun Mountains at noon tomorrow. Boom. Zhang Han stopped and turned around. He looked at the other people and answered, okay. If I remember it right, the Kiao clan is in the east of Mount Five Flowers in the west district of the city, and the Lin clan is in the west of Mount Five Flowers, right? I will go to Mount Five Flowers at noon tomorrow. Tell your backer Emperor King to wait for me there. I will destroy both clans of yours if he's absent or late. Zhang Han then turned away calmly, leaving all those people staring at his back. They had not expected things to turn out like this. They were just two rich playboys. Jiang Yanlan said coldly to those people from the two clans. She was so angry when she heard the news. She just couldn't understand why it was so hard for the two clans to give up Kiao and Linji. She wondered why they had to cause trouble time and again. Since Emperor King would end his seclusion, she wanted to ask those people if that was really what they wanted. God knows what will happen when the two of them fight. Jiang Yanlan said and left the place hastily. Phew. The people left in the room felt as if a huge burn had been taken off their shoulders. That experience had been like a visit to the gates of hell. They also noticed the two that had been completely turned into stone. Kiao and Linji stood there like two statues. The campus girl from Linhai City was terrified. She felt her whole world had fallen apart. What's going on? Ma Liang was also dumbfounded. Child Lin was one of the 4 young masters in Shangjing. How could he be killed this easily? Who on earth is that man? Grand Master Zhang, Mr. Zhang, he's ruthless? Those who knew Zhang Han before were even more shocked. Is he still their Zhang Han we used to know? No. He's a devil. It was beyond everyone's expectation that so many things would happen in that evening's party. Nobody knew that Kiao and Linji, the famous young masters in Shangjing, would end just like this. A few people even had heard Kiao and Linji saying what they would do to those pretty girls that night when the party began. It turned out they would never have the chance. What should we do? Someone from the Lin clan asked with a trembling voice. Carry them back, a man from the Kiao clan answered. That's the least we can do, somebody replied. Many people sighed and half of them gathered around the two statues. 4 of them were from the Kiao clan while the other 4 were from the Lin clan. They were going to carry the two back home, hoping that there were ways to save them. Come and help me, all of you. As they approached, the expression of the 2 stone statues made them feel frightened. But they had to move the 2 statues. One person from the Lin clan touched Linji's arms. Crash. The 2 bodies collapsed into ashes which later ended making contact with the skin of those carriers. As a result, my hand. What's wrong with my hand? My legs. The 8 people near the 2 statues were turned into statues at an unbelievable speed. Many people were startled. Run, run. Jiang Yanlan had already gone downstairs, but she seemed to have heard the scream in the room upstairs. She raised her head and yelled, 1 second, Zhang Han Yang. She walked quickly to Zhang Han and the other 2 people. They were a dozen meters ahead of her. Hello. Instructor Liu hid on the other side of Zhang Han and greeted Jiang Yanlan. Gorgeous, you should stop throwing yourself at my boss. He already has a family. I'm the only single man here. Why don't you get lost? Jiang Yanlan seemed angry and was about to teach him a lesson, but she stopped when she saw Zhang Han's profile. She was a peak Grand Master, and she knew she would never be able to beat Zhang Han, but at least she could run away from him. That was also part of her ability. A powerhouse like her wouldn't allow a Grand Master at the early stage to keep playing around with her. You are just flaunting the power borrowed from him. People like you wouldn't be able to survive 3 days in Shangjing. I'm telling you, you'll be dead in 1 or less than 1 day, said Jiang Yanlan with her finger pointing at Instructor Liu. Instructor Liu smiled awkwardly and stopped talking. He was trying to get close to Jiang Yanlan because he thought she was fun, but then he stopped because he didn't want to be beaten. The scene made Zhang Han laugh. He looked at Jiang Yanlan and asked, what else do you want to say? Do you really have to fight with Emperor King? Jiang Yanlan asked. You are both cherished talents of the martial arts world. We've done some research and found that you love Meng Meng very much, so it is very unlikely that you'll live in the worldlets in the future. Emperor King will stay in Shangjing almost forever. Both of you will be able to take charge of your own fields one day, and you'll definitely advance into the divine realm. The National Security Agency is still in a disadvantaged position when it comes to facing the worldlets. As the representative of the National Security Agency, I don't want you two to fight to the death. Then you should go and ask Emperor King. I'll be in Mount Five Flowers on time tomorrow, Zhang Han said and got in the back seat of the car. Zhao Feng was in the driver's seat, while Instructor Liu sat next to him. Jiang Yanlan didn't want to speak further. Her face turned calm and watched the car leave. She was trying to talk the two out of this, and if the two insisted, she had no choice but to let them be. However, as the car was leaving, Instructor Liu yelled out, "Gorgeous! Don't just stand there and watch us leave, just go back, it's cold outside." Jiang Yanlan seemed to be sulking again. Her hands pressed forward and sent two transparent palms to slap the Rolls-Royce from both sides. However, the energy was soon dissipated when the two energy palms approached the car. Jiang Yanlan didn't dispel the attack. It had been shattered by Zhang Han. Zhang Han Yang, my supervisor will be back tomorrow. If you insist on your fight, you should know that he has a really bad temper. Jiang Yanlan reminded Zhang Han using telepathy. Then she snorted and got into her Volkswagen Beetle. She hopped in and drove to Mount Redleaf in the southern suburbs. There was a small manor on the mountain. Deep in the manor, there was a stone cabin in which Emperor King secluded himself for cultivation. More than 30 people were sitting in front of the stone cabin at the moment. Most of them were from the Lin clan and the Kiao clan, including their patriarchs. They sat on a few rows of small stools which were 20 meters away from the stone cabin. There was a table and a chair in front of the stone house. A thin and weak man in his 50s was sitting there and drinking tea. "Master Wang, where is Emperor King?" A woman quickly rushed over. As she approached, other people saw her face. It was Jiang Yanlan. Master Wang knew why she was there as soon as he saw her. He smiled and said slowly, "Captain Jiang. Young master just made a breakthrough the day before yesterday. He will end his seclusion and go to Mount Five Flowers to meet Zhang Han Yang at noon tomorrow." Chapter 626, Gathering in Mount Five Flowers. Master Wang shocked many people, most of whom were from the Kiao family and the Chu family. Although they had just heard the news, they still felt inner happiness after listening to it again. Why? Because the hateful Zhang Han Yang had trampled on the dignity of these two families. Now it was known by the whole Shangjing that merciless Zhang was here and both the Kiao family and the Lin family were in danger. Because he announced that he would go to Mount Five Flowers to destroy the two families at noon the next day. No one knew whether he wanted to destroy the buildings there or even the members of the two families together. No one dared to guess his intentions. Therefore, the core members of the two families all went to Mount Redleaf to seek the protection of Emperor King. They were even ready to evacuate their whole families. Fortunately, Emperor King promised to help them, and they believed that Emperor King could win the battle or end it with a draw as the worst result. Thinking about it, everyone in the room began to discuss with each other. Emperor King is sure to win. How powerful does Zhang Han Yang think he is? How dare he compare himself with Emperor King? Yes, Emperor King is a legend, though Zhang Han Yang is mighty. He has no good character. He is arrogant, murderous, and deserves to die. Not only that, when Jiang Yanlan heard the words, he frowned and said in a cold voice, "Stop." Jiang Yanlan's voice contained some of her spiritual force, which shocked everyone both physically and mentally. For a while, they were rendered speechless and looked at her doubtfully. "Captain Jiang, what do you mean?" asked someone. "Emperor King and Zhang Han Yang are both talented and can't be criticized by ordinary people like you. If you have the courage, you can speak ill of Emperor King here, or go to Zhang Han to speak ill of him, rather than discuss behind them cowardly. Jiang Yanlan's tone was cold. Ordinary people couldn't get the position of captain of the Million-Bird National Security Agency. Jiang Yanlan's strength was not only reflected in her strength, but also in the force supporting her. Jiang Yanlan was very casual, which had won her the appreciation of Yi Danlang. She never showed her strength in front of Zhang Han, but that didn't mean she was not strong. It was scary when she was as serious as she was now. Her words silenced the others. They didn't speak, but Jiang Yanlan's anger didn't seem to disappear. Turning her gaze to Patriarch Yao and Patriarch Qi, she said gravely, "As the patriarch of your family, don't you know how to restrain those young men? Don't you know how arrogant they are? They even sent their men to the hotel to catch someone's wife. What else do you want to say? If you gave up helping the two ignorant young men who are in trouble, you wouldn't have stepped into the current predicament. It's you who are arrogant and careless. All you know is to shut up the victim after your juniors get into trouble. Now you're finally in trouble, but it's too late." Patriarch Yao and Patriarch Lin felt ashamed, but they didn't know what to say. They were in unspeakable suffering. As the leaders of their families, both of them were smart. However, they usually had a lot of things to do and had no time to manage the younger generation's affairs. Now both of them were a little depressed. As Jiang Yanlan had said, they could have given up helping the two troublemaking children in their family, instead of finding themselves in such a predicament, which was not what they wanted, but they couldn't go back. They had been at the gambling table. Only by winning could they survive without losing their money and even lives. HMPH. Jiang Yanlan snorted and rushed to the foot of the mountain as fast as the light in the dark. She didn't want to stay here anymore. Yes, she couldn't get involved in it anymore, and she decided to let them solve it by themselves. At the same time, the news that Emperor King, who had just made a breakthrough, would fight with Zhang Han in Mount Five Flowers at noon the next day shocked many people. Emperor King had overwhelmed the super talents of an era, and no one of the younger generation could defeat him. He had never lost a competition since he became famous, and all the poor fellows killed by him were well-known strong martial artists. Emperor King had been making breakthroughs as smoothly as drinking water with the help of King Dragon Blood. Now, it was the age of Emperor King. Zhang Han became famous in Hong Kong half a year ago and then killed He Qingshan. He also defeated Xiang Qishan and all those talents from the world lit. Last but not least, he killed 6 Grandmaster strong, including Li Zun with weird spells, and then defeated Ge Ixing Kong with demon dancing sword. Not long ago, Zhang Han, as a Grandmaster, had been to Lin Hai City and killed Gudong Glai, who had advanced to the Lin Hai City. This was a unique feat. Seeing such achievements, no one dared to say that Zhang Han was not as strong as Emperor King. Even in the recently released list of dangerous people, Zhang Han was ranked first, while Emperor King was the second. Now the whole martial arts world knew that there was Emperor King in the north and Merciless Zhang in the south. They put the strongest talents in the south and the north in the same position. This news, like a 12-magnitude earthquake, shocked the whole martial arts world in Shangjing. Then it turned into a hurricane and began to sweep in all directions, including Ice City in the northeast, Lin Hai in the southeast, the northwest, the southwest, and even Hong Kong. Many martial artists were excited. What did you say? Emperor King is going to fight with Zhang Han? It's really like Mars colliding with Earth. It's the collision between Merciless Zhang in the south and Emperor King in the north. God, it's so exciting. If King Emperor didn't make a breakthrough, he might be relatively in a weak position. However, he has been cultivating recently, and he must have advanced into the Divine Realm when he comes out. Emperor King at Divine Realm will be horrible. I don't know who will win the battle. In any case, I must go to see the battle myself. This should be the most dazzling battle since the small world closed. Countless people could not sit still when they heard the news. The battle was set at noon the next day, and they had to hurry to the scene to witness the battle. In the Gai family at the suburb of Ice City in the northeast. Is Han going to fight with Emperor King? Gai Xingkong was reviewing spear methods under an old tree, when he learned the news. His eyes lit up. Emperor King is a descendant of the warlord of the Chan clan, who was a god state strong and may be very close to the Earth realm stage. Han won't be defeated even if Emperor King has advanced into the divine realm, but I'm afraid that the Chan clan's warlord will intervene in this matter and cause some unimaginable troubles. I must go to Shangjing to help Han. That night, many martial artists in Ice City felt that a large shadow in the shape of a spear swept over the Gai family's sky, which was shocking. They knew that it should be Dragon Tiger Spear, and the target of the spear was Shangjing. Hong Kong, Master Ji. It will be hard for them to stop once they begin fighting. Mo Chengfeng sighed. I favor Zhang Han not only because of his strength, but he will find it difficult to beat the Chan clan's warlord in Shangjing, if he loses. Wang said slowly. Yi Danlang won't stand by. After thinking about it over and over, Wang sighed. I'll go there myself. In a manor at the northern suburb of Shenzhen. Oh, is that guy going to fight with Emperor King? Muggs, lying in the pool with rose petals, was surprised to hear the maid's news. She hurried to her feet and even forgot to dress. I must go there and get my demon dancing sword back if Zhang Han Yang is killed. I hate his disgusting incantation. Arrange the plane, we'll go to Shangjing in an hour. Muggs strolled out of the bathroom. Arrange the plane, we'll go to Shangjing in an hour. Muggs walked slowly out of the bathroom. Muggs was not the only one. All the representatives from the forces formed by the wordlet talents, who didn't come back after the gates closing, heard the news. Yi Longyuan, who was doing closed-door cultivation, burst out laughing. Zhang Han Yang likes to fight and makes trouble wherever he goes. I like him. Prepare for it. I'll go to Shangjing to watch the battle myself. Far away from Yi Longyuan, Shi Fengwu of Wind Snow School was discussing with some of his martial brothers. We are going to avenge our two brothers who were killed by Zhang Han Yang. Elder martial brother Shay, Zhang Han Yang is ruthless and deserves to be punished. We are enough to kill him. We will get back the Wind Snow School's dignity. Shi Fengwu frowned as if he was annoyed by the noisy crowd. Zhang Han Yang is not as ordinary as you think. You stay here to have a rest, and I'll go to Shangjing alone. That's it. Many people set out for Shangjing that night to witness the battle. All the forces in Shangjing city were also shocked by the news. The news spread slowly in Shangjing, and they didn't know that Zhang Han Yang had come to Shangjing until now. Even the Zhang family was stunned at the news and wondering if they should keep preparing the money for Zhang Han. It was hard to predict who would win the battle, Emperor King or Zhang Han Yang. The Liu family, which had been standing by, felt frightened after hearing the news about Emperor King and Zhang Han Yang. Damn it. The Liu family lived in Mount Five Flowers, and they would be seriously affected if the battle was too fierce. Mount Five Flowers was a park, with only one entrance and one exit in the south and north. There were manors of the Lin family, the Kiao family, and the Liu family in other directions. As onlookers, they didn't expect to be involved in it. Tomorrow, we'll all go out to avoid it tomorrow. Patriarch Liu reluctantly issued this order in the middle of the night. More and more people came from all over the nation to Shangjing. No one wanted to miss this world-shaking battle. In Dongfeng Hotel on North 3rd Ring Road of Shangjing City, Zhang Han was lying on the bed, telling a story to Meng Meng in a low voice. King of Dwarves and King of Elves sailed to the deep sea on the big ship. Gradually, they found more and more strange animals. What were those animals? Asked Meng Meng. Well, it was a big fish called tiger fish. After the explanation, Zhang Han told a story of more than 10 minutes. After a while, Meng Meng fell asleep. Xian did not lie on her back today, but she gently supported her face and looked at Zhang Han tenderly. Zhang Han saw worry in her eyes. After Meng Meng fell asleep, Zhang got up gently and waved to Zhang Han. Zhang Han got up and followed her out of the bedroom. I've heard that Emperor King is at the Divine Realm stage and very powerful, and I know why you haven't reached that level yet. Now that they failed, you'd better give it up. Zhang was nervous. Zhang Han smiled while touching Zhang's slender neck. Don't worry, I can defeat him with just one hand. Have you forgotten your husband's identity? Your identity? Well, my husband is an immortal. Zhang replied in a childlike way. I'm a cultivator. She amused Zhang Han. You can rest assured, I've shown you that I can make myself invisible and retreat whenever I want. Besides, I have some treasures. They began to whisper in the living room. More than half an hour later, Zhang Han returned to their bedroom with Zhang in his arms and fell asleep. What was going to happen the next day didn't affect their sleep quality. However, the people next door to them had all lost sleep. They were so nervous that they couldn't sleep at the thought of the battle with Emperor King the next day. They didn't know how the night passed. Early in the next morning, according to his plan, Zhang Han made breakfast for his family and then went out to play with Meng in a children's park. It was another ordinary day for him. But Mount Five Flowers in the downtown area was closed today. Armed soldiers guarded all 5 streets around it. However, the number of people on Mount Five Flowers did not decrease but increased a lot, which was 10 times more than the usual maximum number of tourists. A middle-aged man of the Zhang family asked Zhang Nan nervously, Patriarch, will we really go to watch the battle? Zhang Nan walked out of the car, followed by a dozen family members from other vehicles. Surrounded by them was the silent Zhang Nan. After a while, he looked up at Mount Five Flowers. We'd better be frank, or we will become a joke because of watching the battle in such a remote corner. Moreover, I can't feel at ease without witnessing this battle. Let's go up. Zhang Nan sighed and headed up the mountain. The altitude of Mount Five Flowers was not high. They walked up all the way, and all the pedestrians they saw were of extraordinary momentum. In the middle of the mountain, the Zhang family members chose a path and went up obliquely. Their destination was the safest peak in the outer circle, which was not in the battle circle predicted by most people, and under the guard of many powerful martial arts. Mount Five Flowers consisted of 5 small peaks, which echoed each other like blooming flowers. 4 of the peaks were on the same side and very close to each other. Many families in Shangjing planned to watch the battle there. The area at the top of the peak was not large, but it was enough to accommodate the Zhangs. As soon as the Zhangs reached the top of the peak, they attracted a lot of people's attention. While some people were laughing at them in silence, others were gloating over their misfortunes. Zhang Nan and his men, who came to see the battle rather than their expressions, ignored them. Zhang Nan stood high and found that many people had gathered in Mount Five Flowers. Looking at the ant-like audience at the foot of the mountain, Zhang Nan felt frightened. The combined strength of these people can easily destroy a city. Perhaps that's why the martial artists are horrible sometimes. Chapter 627, Brother Han. Jianyun Mountains stretched for more than 3 miles, with pleasant scenery. There were many trees and luxuriant grasses in the mountains. There was a hill full of red maple trees deep in the mountains. The whole mountain seemed to be painted with a layer of red clouds in autumn, so it was called Mount Red Leaf. 2 people were now standing on the edge of a cliff at the back of Mount Red Leaf. The aged man was Master Wang, who sat in front of Emperor King's door yesterday. The other was a young man with a pretty face and long hair. He seemed to come out of a fairy tale. He was looking at the beautiful scenery of the mountains ahead with some melancholy in his eyes. He was Emperor King. The cliff was at the height of 100 meters, and the cold wind blew all the year round. Young master, you have reached the divine realm, and your king dragon blood is stronger. Now that you are almost invincible, it will be easy for you to kill Zhang Han Yang. He had great confidence in Emperor King and believed that Emperor King was the real invincible Grand Master before he made the breakthrough, let alone that now he was a divine realm master. Emperor King didn't say anything or change his facial expression after hearing Master Wang's words. 10 seconds later, he said, I'm not interested in Zhang Han, though there may be a big secret in him. But he doesn't know what my trump card is, either. Why did you promise to help the Qiao family? Asked Master Wang in confusion. Because. Emperor King shook his head slightly. I feel bored. Emperor King walked tens of meters in the air as if stepping on the solid ground. The second step. The third step. He walked in the air like an immortal. Master Wang looked at him excitedly and murmured, "Fly to the sky, dive to the ground, this is the divine realm." Master Wang looked at him excitedly and murmured, "Fly to the sky, dive to the ground, this is the divine realm." Mount Five Flowers was bustling now. Half an hour before noon, many people were standing in the center of Mount Five Flowers, waiting for a good position. When the two sides began to fight, they would step back to both sides. They had noticed that there were too many people around, and tens of thousands of martial artists should be in the end. It was not a concert with a super clear screen and a big stereo. If they stood back, they might not see anything. As a result, more and more people crowded into the central area. They discussed with each other while walking. It's less than half an hour before noon. Will Zhang Han and Emperor King arrive on time? The battle between these two strong men will be very fierce, and may even reduce the altitude of Mount Five Flowers by half. Is this the most remarkable battle of talents in the martial arts world in China? While they were talking about it, several warnings suddenly rang out in the central area. Step back. Many people gasped in fear when they saw the speaker. They are Azure Dragon Detachment of National Security Agency. I never expected them to come here for the battle. All the martial artists knew that the National Security Agency usually sent ordinary members, supervisors, chief supervisors, and protectors to handle affairs, while the core staff was rarely seen. If the trouble were not easy to solve, they would send elder masters or directors there, though there were no directors in Shangjing. The four detachments, including Azure Dragon, were superior to directors. Wait, are those girls from Vermilion Bird Detachment? They came here too? In their opinion, most of the members of Vermilion Bird Detachment were female, therefore, when they talked about Vermilion Bird, their tone changed. It was full of interest in beautiful women. White Tiger Detachment, who have the power to execute, are also there. I see Black Tortoise Detachment. My gosh, all the four detachments are here today. Not only that. A middle-aged man in the crowd found four people standing on several tall old trees in the central area. He said in a deep voice, Azure Dragon, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise, all four captains are here. Whoa, it's hard to see the four captains together. It seems that they are also very concerned about this battle. Whoa, it's hard to see the four captains together. It seems that they are also very concerned about this battle. Of course, the battle between Merciless Zhang and Emperor King would be the most dazzling battle in the world. When everyone was discussing about it, the crowd in the center of Mount Five Flowers retreated to both sides because each of the four detachments had sent 40 or 50 people to drive them in four directions. Soon, the central area and the road to the Lin and Qiao families were cleared, at the top of some old trees in the center. Azure Dragon looked at the crowd below and said with a smile, "It's like a grand meeting of martial artists. I'd rather not see such a grand meeting." Jiang Yanlan of Vermilion Bird snorted, "Why must they fight against each other instead of staying in the south and north, respectively? It's a big loss for either of them to die." "I don't think so." The fat Captain Xuanhuan shook his head. While Emperor King is supported by the Chan clan's warlord, who is Zhang Han's supporter, I heard that Gai Xingkong reached the Divine Realm stage recently, and is now a competitive master with the help of Dragon Tiger Spear. Martial artists like them who rely on their strength to make breakthroughs are amazing. Perhaps Emperor King and Zhang Han just want to compete with each other? Do you believe it? White Tiger glanced at him and shook his head slightly. Now that they choose to fight, I'm afraid they will fight to death. Perhaps our elder brother can stop them if he comes back. Although the list of dangerous people was made under his guidance and was very interested in their fight, He will not wait for them to fight death. Azure Dragon faintly smiled when he saw that the central area was cleared. It's time to leave. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The captains walked on the tip of the trees and soon came to the eastern edge area. Behind them were the Zhang family and many prominent families. Although this place was far from the battle circle, no one knew how destructive Zhang Han, Yang and Emperor King were. Therefore, this place also needed their key protection. These prominent families couldn't afford to be in trouble. In addition to the Zhangs, many members of the top families were in Shangjing, including the Qiaos and the Lins, who were most concerned about who would win the battle. Some patriarchs and co-members of each family occupied the places with good vision at the front. As for ordinary members, they were crowded together at the back. Among them, Zhang Han knew Zhang Yuan, Zhang Chen, and Liu Feng. Zhang Han grew up so fast in such a short period. Zhang Chen exclaimed, "He is worth looking up to by most martial artists now. Even all the patriarchs are not as good as him." It turns out that the influence of the talents in the martial arts world is so great. Zhang Chen sighed with emotion. He had been pursuing fame and wealth all his life and finally got the position of patriarch. But all his fame and wealth was worth nothing because any martial arts masters would kill him or prolong his life easily. This understanding challenged Zhang Chen's worldview, and his pursuit had changed quietly. "He's a devil." Liu Feng gasped in fear because he recalled the terrible experience from before. Liu Feng remembered Zhang Han killing those people and turning to look at him. Zhang Han's magical face and weird eyes made him tremble. Liu Feng didn't know Emperor King very well. He had come here just to witness this world-shaking battle. The girls around were discussing about Zhang Han. "We all came here to see Zhang Han. It's said that the former young master of the Zhang family was very handsome. How could he become so powerful in such a short time? We all come here to see Zhang Han. It is said that the former young master of Zhang family was very handsome. How could he become so powerful in such a short time? We seem to be watching two generals fighting. Both of them are marvelous. I've heard of Emperor King, but I haven't seen him. As for Zhang Han, I know him, and maybe I can attract him when we meet again." The chubby girl who was speaking happened to be standing not far away from Liu Feng. Turning around to take a glance at the girl, Liu Feng felt his mouth trembling slightly. After 2 seconds of silence, he uttered a sentence, "Stop dreaming. Do you know who is Zhang Han's wife?" "Who?" someone asked. "Xian." The crowd fell into silence. They couldn't help but think of the image of Xian in the screen and thought it was reasonable. Only a strong man like Zhang Han could conquer such a beautiful woman. 90% of the tens of thousands of people there were martial artists. Most of them were talking and expressing their ideas. Suddenly, several exclamations came from the crowd. "Who is he? The one with a black robe, long hair and big body, who is flying in the air? This. Is he Mukisha? My God, how did he come?" "Hiss, Mukisha." They turned their gaze and saw a man with long hair and a black robe standing on the west side of the sky. He stepped on a 3-meter-long black silk scarf with a gourd containing wine in his hand, drinking while flying towards the crowd. Many people who had never seen Divine Realm martial artists, such as Zhang Chen, Zhang Yuan, Liu Feng, and many others, were astonished. "He can fly. Is he still human?" They felt it was incredible, and their worldview was broken at this moment. Human beings had conquered the sky by science and technology, but this was the first time they had seen someone who could move freely in the air and underground by virtue of their own strength. The expression of other experienced martial artists changed. When someone around them was confused, they gave the answer. Mukisha became famous 50 years ago when he was at Grandmaster late stage. He emerged from the desert in the north and killed all the way from the north to the south. It took him 5 years to advance from Grandmaster late stage to Divine Realm through fighting with other martial artists, which was amazing. It was said that he took a kind of elixir and could cultivate and make breakthroughs through fighting. He disappeared again when he reached the Divine Realm. Someone recently saw him in a desert relic, killing 10 martial artists at Grandmaster Peak as soon as he appeared. It was terrible. I didn't expect to see him here. The battle today is unpredictable. The experienced martial artist's explanation shocked the younger generation. They didn't expect Mukisha to be so fierce. He attracted the attention of all the onlookers. Under everyone's gaze, Mukisha, stepping on his silk scarf, slowly drifted to Mount Five Flowers. He took a big drink and burped. Hiccup. Hearing his thundering hiccups, many people blocked their ears. Mukisha turned his gaze, which was like a sharp arrow, at a place on the east side of Mount Five Flowers. He thundered, "Old Chen, come to fight with me." Swish. A lot of people turned around and looked at the east side of Mount Five Flowers. Old Chen? Only a few people knew who Old Chen was. Buzz, a man, who looked like an ordinary older adult dressed in a suit of cloth, quickly rose into the air from an old forest on the east side. However, he had a very powerful nickname, Warlord of the Chan clan. He was so famous that it was said that he had been very close to the Earth realm 15 years ago. No one knew whether he had advanced to the next stage or not, but there were few competitors at the Divine Realm who had the strength to compete with him. Warlord replied calmly, "Mukisha, you are drunk." "I'm drunk? Haha, I'm not." Mukisha laughed and threw the wine-containing gourd forward with his right hand. Bang! With a thundering sound, the wine-containing gourd suddenly turned huge in front of the Warlord of the Chan clan. With a thundering sound, the wine-containing gourd suddenly turned huge in front of the Warlord of Chan clan. It seemed as if this wine-containing gourd could suck him in as described in the legend. Obviously, the wine-containing gourd was a powerful divine weapon. Under everyone's gaze, the wine-containing gourd emitted green light and began to absorb the air. What suction force! The Chan clan's warlord smiled when he saw the wine-containing gourd. "Aren't you drunk?" Then he waved his right hand. Bang! The wine-containing gourd was beaten and flew back. It gradually became smaller before it arrived at Mukisha's hand. The Chan clan's warlord said, "It's not our game, wake up." Hiccup. Mukisha belched again. Then he took another sip of the wine and praised. "The wine tastes better after being beaten by you." After that, he stopped talking and began to drink wine. The Chan clan's warlord no longer hid but faced Mukisha in the air. "Where is Yi Tanlang? I'll fight with him." Mukisha turned his gaze to Azure Dragon and his friends. The four captains felt great pressure. "He's on a business trip." The chubby Captain Xuanhuan replied in a muffled voice. He even dared not to speak loudly. "It's so boring. When will the gate of the world lit be opened? There are few Divine Realm martial artists in the world to be killed by me." Mukisha sighed and continued drinking. His words shocked a lot of people and arose a new round of discussion. "Mukisha is so powerful. My gosh, is he a Divine Realm martial artist? He is so frightening. I'm afraid he can kill us whenever he wants. Emperor King may be at the Divine Realm stage, too. Zhang Han will be at risk. When the crowd was discussing, the Chan clan's warlord turned his gaze to the south and said, "Here you are." When the other martial artists looked to the south, they saw a figure flying in the air from afar, changing from unreal to real. Then it turned into a streamer and soon came near. He was soon identified. Hong Kong's Xuanhuan, another Divine Realm martial artist. "Wow, there are 3 Divine Realm martial artists here. It's frightening. I don't trust you, so I came," replied Xuanhuan. "Would I interfere in the fight among the younger generation?" He amused the Chan clan's warlord, "As long as it has something to do with Emperor King." Xuanhuan nodded. "You two don't talk nonsense. Old Ji, would you like to fight with me?" asked Mukisha. "No." When Xuanhuan finished answering, he closed his eyes and stopped talking. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked at the east side of the mountain. A golden light came quickly from afar, bringing pressure to everyone. This was a strong man standing on a long spear, North Tiger, Gaik Singkong. "Oh? The Chan clan's warlord said in confusion, "You also took this step?" He knew that Ge Xingkong had reached the divine realm, but he did not expect Ge Xingkong's breakthrough to be so perfect. Many grandmaster peak martial artists in the world could advance to the divine realm stage, but they had been struggling to suppress their cultivation and waiting for a chance to make a breakthrough in the world lit. Because breakthroughs were different. Divine realm was a vital watershed, and the breakthrough in this period was significant. Therefore, Ge Xingkong's breakthrough surprised him. Elder Chen. When Ge Xingkong arrived, he withdrew his dragon tiger spear and made obeisance to the Chan clan's warlord. "Thanks for taking care of Zhang Han Yang. It was the chance encounter he found for me that helped me to make the breakthrough." Those words were like a tossed stone that created 1,000 ripples. Why, Zhang Han Yang helped Ge Xingkong to make the breakthrough? How is this possible? Is Zhang Han Yang so powerful? Many people didn't believe it. The Chan clan's warlord was surprised. There were lots of things required to advance to the divine realm, and even the Chan clan's warlord couldn't guarantee the success of breakthrough. That was why Emperor King had stayed at Grandmaster Peak for so long a time. He wondered if Emperor King could defeat Zhang Han Yang. The situation changed. All those who were not optimistic about Zhang Han Yang were reminded of his strength. Wow, so many people here. It was a woman. Mugs, dressed in black, came from afar and stepped on the top of the tree, waving to them. "Hello, old Chen and old Mu. Hello, little girl." Mu Kisha smiled and said, "I heard that Zhang Han Yang robbed you of your demon dancing sword. Shall I kill him for you?" "Okay." Mugs narrowed her eyes and replied with a smile. "Ha ha ha ha." All of a sudden, a loud laugh covered the whole Mount Five Flowers. Ge Xingkong stared at Mu Kisha. "My dragon tiger spear doesn't agree with you." The other martial artists were shocked by them. Will they have a fight before Emperor King and Zhang Han arrive? "Well? Do you want to fight with me?" Mu Kisha looked at Ge Xingkong and said, "Don't be so arrogant after making the breakthrough. Maybe the number of divine realm martial artists will soon be reduced by one." The atmosphere was dense. Suddenly, a faint voice sounded from afar. "I'll send someone to tear down your family if you fight here." Under everyone's gaze, a man in rags like a beggar was flying towards them. Captain Xuanhuan cheered, "Eldest brother." As your dragon also secretly wiped his cold sweat because he could hardly control the scene. Fortunately, his eldest brother came back in time. "Yi Danlang, I'm glad you are here." Mu Kisha laughed and was about to raise his wine-containing gourd again. "Stop. Emperor King is coming, and you'd better stop fooling around." Yi Danlang waved his hand. Mu Kisha stopped. He didn't want to fight since the protagonists were here. After all, this was a competition between the two individuals. If he still dared to make trouble here, he would be jointly educated by the Chan clan's warlord, Yi Danlang, and Ge Xingkong. Thus, everyone began to look in other directions. In the end, they all focused on the southeast and were shocked by what they saw. The outline of a ferocious azure dragon was flying in the clouds with great power, and all the martial artists who saw the dragon had a sense of suffocation. It was very similar to Ge Xingkong's appearance, but the appearance of Emperor King was even more amazing and attractive. "I believe Emperor King will win the fight." Yes. Emperor King is now at Divine Realm stage. He's amazing. Let alone his King Dragon blood. Even Ge Xingkong began to worry about Zhang Han after seeing this. His breakthrough is as perfect as mine. It will be difficult for Han to win the battle. What if Han is defeated? I must save him. Ge Xingkong got nervous. He was really worried about Zhang Han. Huh? Mu Kisha slightly narrowed his eyes. Warlord, congratulations, another marvelous martial artist was born in the Chan family. This. Wang's facial expression froze as he sighed. I don't think the battle today is necessary. I wonder if Brother Chen can spare Zhang Han Yang's life since I'm here. Please spare his life. Ge Xingkong made obeisance to the Chan clan's warlord. Hearing their words, The crowd fell into silence. Even Yilong Yuan and Shi Fengyu at the edge firmly believed that there was no suspense about the outcome of this battle. However, the Chan clan's warlord though about the entreaties of the two powerful god-state strongs and then shook his head. The confrontation between the warriors cannot be compromised. Both Gai Xingkong and Wang were depressed. Han, why did you promise to fight with him? Gai Xingkong felt so sad, but he made up his mind to prevent Zhang Han from being killed. Under everyone's gaze, that outline of dragon soon arrived at the mountain. It was floating over Mount Five Flowers. After the dragon disappeared, Emperor King was seen in a traditional Chinese long gown, which made him more like an immortal. All the members of the Qiao family and Lin family burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha, Emperor King is sure to win the battle. Where is Zhang Han Yang, the arrogant young man? Why is he not here? Is he too frightened to come here? When everyone was discussing about it, all of a sudden, a man came quickly from the far east. It's Zhang Han Yang. Several shouts rang from the crowd. Everyone was looking at Zhang Han Yang except for Emperor King. He was still facing the west. Did he look down on Zhang Han Yang? Didn't he admit Zhang Han Yang's strength? Zhang Han Yang was approaching the mountain. He was getting closer. Until that moment, did everyone see clearly that Zhang Han Yang was walking in the air? Every step he took, he went forward 100 meters. This was not the speed that normal martial artists could reach. He can also fly. Many onlookers were confused and shocked. Zhang Han Yang, today is your death. I will sacrifice the soul of my family members with your life, said a grandmaster from the Qiao family. He was like a dog threatening people on the strength of its master's power. But what he said was very close to the fact recognized by others. Really? Zhang Han approached him and waved his right hand. Bang! With a muffled sound, the martial artist of the Qiao family was turned into a blood mist. Before everyone realized what had happened, they saw Zhang Han looking at Emperor King's back in surprise. As for the immortal-like Emperor King, his body shivered violently when he heard Zhang Han's voice. Then he turned around to look at Zhang Han in confusion and joy. He said in a low, quivering voice, "Brother Han?" Boom! The others felt as if there were tens of thousands of thunders in their minds. Almost everyone was stunned for the time being. What did you say? Chapter 628, A Devil or an Immortal? Brother Han? What's going on? Why did Emperor King call him Brother Han? Ah! All the martial artists on the mountain were astonished, including Yi Danlang. His facial expression froze and his mouth was quivering. Yi Danlang had carefully planned and guided this battle to see the limit and potential of the two men. However, they were so familiar with each other that Emperor King even called him Brother Han. What a joke. Yi Danlang felt as if he had swallowed a fly. It made him uncomfortable. As for the four captains following him, all of Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Black Tortoise were stunned with their eyes widely opened. They had expected to see an earth-shaking battle and even witnessed Zhang Han Yang's death. However, Zhang Han Yang was Emperor King's brother Han. Though they felt much more relaxed now because of the imminent cancellation of this battle, they couldn't help complaining. It's unbelievable, Zhang Han Yang, what's your real identity? Vermilion Bird was confused. What had happened shocked her. Their eldest brother got the same feeling they had. On the other side, Wang didn't know what to say now. Am I here to witness the reunion of you two? I'd rather to see a fierce battle. He was ready to watch the battle and help Zhang Han Yang when he was in danger. That was why he had come all the way here. But now, he seemed useless. Gai Xingkong was overjoyed because Zhang Han avoided this battle, and he was no longer worried about the outcome. He almost burst out laughing. What's going on? Mu Kisha grinned, hummed, and turned to leave. He didn't want to stay here any longer. It turns out that Emperor King is Zhang Han Yang's brother. It's amazing. Mugs was surprised and then annoyed. I can't get Demon Dancing Sword back this time. I must make a breakthrough as soon as possible and get it back by myself. At the same time, many people, including Yilong Yuan and Shi Fenwu, were stunned. The most astonished were the Qiao, Lin, and Zhang families. All the members in the presence of the Qiao and Lin families were pale. They thought they had found a super strong helper. However, it turned out that their helper was Zhang Han Yang's little brother. This is ridiculous. Zhang Nan, the patriarch of the Zhang family, kept changing his facial expression in embarrassment. He must pay back 10 billion to Zhang Han. At the same time, the other martial artists on Mount Five Flowers were in confusion. They couldn't understand those grand masters. Zhang Han was looking at Emperor King in surprise. King, Zhang Han whispered. He found out more truth at this moment. In his past life, he had been bullied and expelled from Shangjing after suffering misfortune. Then he had received Chen King's call, who had urged to go back to the Zhang family with him and get justice for him. It turned out that he had begun to cultivate at that time, and he had disappeared several times in order to cultivate, but every time he appeared, he would always follow Zhang Han and call him Brother Han. He always acted according to Zhang Han's wishes. When they were retaliated, they would always bear each other's pain together. Scenes of the past floated in Zhang Han's mind. Almost everyone would make a lot of friends in their life, but few could be called brothers. Obviously, Emperor King or Chen King was one of Zhang Han's brothers. Brother Han, I didn't expect you to be Zhang Han Yang. How could you become so powerful? Emperor King, who used to be calm, was now as excited as a boy. While keeping talking, he rushed to Zhang Han and was about to give him a big hug. Wait. Zhang Han could barely keep the smile off of his face. He stretched out his palm to stop Emperor King and said seriously, our fight is not over. The fight? Chen King was surprised. It's impossible for me to challenge you, and I may not be as powerful as you. He was modest in the face of Zhang Han. If it were anyone else who challenged him, he would already have taken action. All the onlookers were again shocked by Emperor King's words. What are you doing? How come you, the famous Emperor King, become his little brother? Do you remember that this is your time? Have you considered how we feel? They didn't sigh for a long time because Zhang Han said, I'm here today to destroy the Qiao and Lin families. Are you going to stop me? Chen King was surprised. Brother Han hasn't changed at all. He is always fierce when punishing his rivals. He took an indifferent glance at the Qiaos and Lins and then nodded at Zhang Han. I won't stop you. His words pushed the Qiaos and the Lins into the freezing ice cave. They all turned pale in desperation. Okay. Zhang Han replied in relief and then stretched out his hands. Blood curse. Crash. A red haze covered all 23 of the Qiao and Lin family members present. Ah! Several screams resounded. 3 seconds later, the red haze and the 23 people dissipated at the same time. Hiss. Many people gasped in fear. No wonder he is called Merciless Zhang. He is merciless, indeed. Zhang Han Yang is worth his fame. I've witnessed how this amazing man became famous. Most of the martial artists were talking rationally, but the members of several other families near the place where the Qiaos and the Lins once stood were frightened. They all stepped back and looked at Zhang Han in horror. Liu Feng, Zhang Chen, and others of the young generations were shocked. At the same time, they felt frightened. Is this the power of a top-level martial artist? He is beyond comparison. No one can defeat such a talented martial artist. Immortal, only immortals have such great power. Their worldview was broken again. Zhang Han remained calm after killing the members of the two families. He looked at Chen King again and then turned his gaze to the tens of thousands of martial artists below. At this moment, he was like a king. Someone said that beauty brings disaster. It's not entirely unreasonable. Many people in Hong Kong know that Xian is my wife, and no one dares to covet her because they are afraid of me. Zhang Han seemed to be giving a speech to the whole world. His voice was like thunder. But there are still many people outside Hong Kong who don't know about it and always want to deal with us by all kinds of means. Well, I'm here to warn all people with such intentions by the fate of the Kiaos and the Lins. When Zhang Han finished speaking, the chi covering him suddenly became stronger. All the people on the mountain were nervous and got a sense of suffocation and oppression. They all knew that Zhang Han Yang or Merciless Zhang was going to take action. Just at that moment, Shen Chenking looked at the cloud in the sky on the left side, and then turned his gaze to Zhang Han and sighed, "Brother Han, for my sake, let me deal with it." As the grandson of the Chan clan's warlord, he could get more information and knew that someone had just come from that direction. That was a man he was afraid of. But he was afraid that his brother Han wouldn't give up, just as he expected. Zhang Han smiled at Shen Chenking and then said slowly, "What if I refuse you?" Shen Chenking fell into silence after hearing Zhang Han's words, and then he found the Chan clan's warlord ignoring him, which meant that it was up to him to make a decision. 10 seconds later, Shen Chenking looked at Zhang Han and smiled, "Let's fight together." There were many complex emotions in this sentence. Maybe they could be summed up with the word bromance. Zhang Han could remember Emperor Qing's mobile phone number 500 years later, which showed that this man was very important to him. After all, the legendary Emperor Qing, who had a very high status, still called him Brother Han. "Let's fight together" meant he would bear the pressure together with Zhang Han in the face of the hidden strongman. "Let's fight together" means he would bear the pressure together with Zhang Han in the face of the hidden strongman. Ha ha ha, okay. Zhang Han burst out laughing. What he wanted to know most was Shen Chenking's attitude. Shen Chenking had never changed, though he was called Emperor Qing now. Tens of thousands of martial artists on the scene fell into an uproar and panic after seeing this scene. It was like a movie. It turns out that Emperor Qing and Merciless Zhang are brothers. My gosh. Their alliance is amazing. Why are my eyes full of tears? Why don't I have brothers like Emperor Qing and Zhang Han Yang? Otherwise, I wouldn't stay in the obvious strength stage for such a long time. I'm lovelorn. A lot of people began to talk about it, but their focus changed gradually. Won't they fight? Which of them is stronger? Yes, the duel has been cancelled, and we can't say they are tied. You know nothing. Many experienced martial artists shook their heads and sighed. Emperor Qing had put himself in a lower position when he called him Brother Han, but in terms of strength, do you think Emperor Qing, who is now at the Divine Realm stage, could not defeat Zhang Han Yang? Although Zhang Han Yang is powerful, he hasn't reached that level yet. As long as he is not at the Divine Realm stage, he can never defeat Emperor Qing. Although he killed Gudong Glai last time, don't forget that Gudong Glai made a breakthrough in the battle and was killed before he could understand the power of the Divine Realm. This is enough to make Zhang Han Yang respectable in the world of martial arts, but it can't prove that he is better than Emperor Qing. The others fell into silence. The aged martial artists' words convinced them. More than 90% of them thought that they wouldn't witness the world-class battle today. Fortunately, the legend of Zhang Han Yang could continue, or it would really be over. Fortunately, the legend of Zhang Han Yang could continue, or it would really be over. Even the captains of the 4 detachments sighed with relief. It's good, or the National Security Agency in Hong Kong would lose one of its directors. The martial arts world of Hong Kong will be in peace as long as Zhang Han Yang is alive. Yes. Jiang Yanlan also relaxed and smiled while looking at Zhang Han's back. The figures of Xian and Meng Meng were floating in her mind. It would be so pitiful if they lost their husband and father so early. Jiang Yanlan's attitude towards Zhang Han was different from that of other people, not only because of Zhang Han's strength but also because of Meng Meng. She had observed Meng Meng for a long time and found the little girl so lovely. Now and then, she would think of the delicate face of Meng Meng. Therefore, she sighed with relief in the face of this scene. But in fact, this was also because she thought Emperor Qing was better than Zhang Han Yang, and there was an 80% chance that Zhang Han Yang would die here if he insisted on participating in the battle. But in fact, this was also because she thought Emperor Qing was better than Zhang Han Yang, and there was an 80% chance that Zhang Han would die here if he insisted on participating in the battle. So boring. Yi Longyuan snorted and left the mountain quickly. He never wasted time. Ha ha. Shi Fengwu was sneering at someone. Two light-colored wings stretched out from his back, with which he flew to the distance and soon disappeared. Many martial artists who could fly in the sky or travel in the earth seldom showed their skills in urban areas, otherwise, they would be chased by the National Security Agency because of the chaos they made. Of course, there were some unbridled exceptions. Their behavior might be sensational at first, but gradually it would be interpreted as magic or computer special effects. All right. Mugs snorted and left. A few other impatient people also left, losing the chance to see the horror scene after that. Old Chen, you made a good plan. Yi Danlang smiled at the Chan clan's warlord. He knew that Zhang Han couldn't defeat Emperor King, who had just made a breakthrough and would be badly injured. Then he could save Zhang Han in exchange for his loyalty to the National Security Agency. He had never expected them to be brothers. Yi Danlang was annoyed and even wanted to beat the Chan clan's warlord. The Chan clan's warlord was smiling at Yi Danlang as if everything was in his expectation. As for Gaik Sinkong and Xuanhuan, the other two Divine Realm martial artists, they were much more relaxed now. Almost 80% of the onlookers believed that Emperor King would win the battle. Almost 80% of the onlookers believed that Emperor King would win the battle. As for the captains of the 4 detachments and several God State Strongs, they even thought that Emperor King would undoubtedly defeat Zhang Han. They could best understand the gap between the Divine Realm stage and the Grandmaster stage. Let's fight if they don't fight. Mukisha took another sip of wine and looked at Gaik Sinkong, who was a little unhappy just now. You have also reached the Divine Realm stage, and I don't know how powerful your Dragon Tiger Spear skill is now. Let me see if you have made any progress. Everyone was excited after hearing his words. God, I didn't expect that Emperor Qin and Zhang Han wouldn't fight, but the 2 God State Strongs are going to fight instead. They all represent the top fighting capacity in the martial arts world, and their wills will shake the world with a fierce battle. They thought they would see another battle, but they heard a bland voice just at the beginning of their discussion. It's not your turn to perform. Huh? Swish. Everyone turned their gaze to Zhang Han because he was the one speaking. How dare he say this to Mukisha? Does he think he is invincible? That was what most people thought. Even Yi Danlang was surprised by Zhang Han's attitude, but he liked it. The Chan clan's warlord frowned slightly at the fearless yet stupid young man. Are you talking to me? Mukisha smiled at Zhang Han. According to Mukisha's expression, the Chan clan's warlord, Yi Danlang, and Xuanhuan knew that he was going to take action. However, Zhang Han ignored him. Dazzling light suddenly burst out of his eyes, making him look like an immortal or more like a devil. Then his body began to rise tens of meters above the ground. Then he began floating above the tens of thousands of martial artists on the ground, who were looking up at him. Gaik Sinkong, Jiang Yanlan, and other grandmasters didn't know what he was doing. All of a sudden, their faces changed. Mukisha, the Chan clan's warlord, Xuanhuan, Gaik Sinkong, and Emperor King were all stunned with their eyes widely opened. Zhang Han's voice was echoing above the mountain. The Lin family and the Qiao family provoked me several times, so I'll destroy them today. Everyone was astonished after hearing his words. It's not over yet. Zhang Han will take further actions. Under everyone's gaze. Buzz. There were only a few dozens of clouds in the clear sky above Mount Five Flowers. However, everyone felt a sudden moment of darkness. Zhang Han was playing one of his trump cards for the first time. The 4,000 clouds above his soul sense sea. The most perfect process of producing rain involved 999 clouds above one's soul sense sea, but Zhang Han had 4,000 clouds now. It meant that his soul sense was now at the middle innateness stage, though he hadn't reached the innateness stage yet. In terms of strength, middle innateness stage was equal to the Earth realm. However, though Zhang Han was at Foundation late stage, which was equal to Grandmaster late stage, he could defeat all the martial artists at Grandmaster late stage. Therefore, there was no comparability between the two strength scoring systems. Zhang Han's vast spiritual sense energy was expanding. His crazy spiritual force covered the sky of Mount Five Flowers with lightning and clouds, which made the other martial artists tremble. The thundercloud, which was oppressive, swept in all directions, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 7 kilometers away from the mountain. It completely covered the Qiao and Lin families on both sides. It was like the end of the world. Zhang Han, as was mentioned before, was more like a devil than an immortal. Mu Qixia and the Chan clan's warlords' faces changed. What's going on? How can his spiritual sense mind trick be so strong? Has he reached the Earth realm? What happened to him? In the place that Chen Shenking paid attention to before, there was no place for that man to hide. That cloud had dissipated under the pressure of such magnificent soul sense. There was an old man with small eyes, who looked at Zhang Han and stretched out his hand. It seemed that he wanted to say something but finally gave up. He was also confused. His soul senses at the Earth realm? Really? When everyone was looking at Zhang Han in fear, he said in a soft voice, "Lightning." When Zhang Han finished speaking, crack, a thunderbolt flashed through the clouds. It was followed by a second, third, and finally thousands of thunderbolts. Everyone was trembling now and couldn't help wondering if Zhang Han was going to destroy the world. Chapter 629, The Destruction of Two Families. The Chan clan's warlord and other god-state strongs finally found something different. The thunderbolts were not real. They were composed of spiritual force, though they were not as powerful as true thunderbolts. They were also destructive. Surprisingly, the spiritual sense-mind trick was real. Though Zhang Han's spiritual sense-mind trick was powerful enough, he could not make the most of it now because he hadn't reached the same stage as his soul sense. But what he did was enough to shock the others. He wanted to show the power of this move. Kaboom! In the thunder and lightning, the dark clouds were compressed down under everyone's panicked gaze. What was their feeling now? They felt as if there was a large mountain falling slowly over their heads. Damn it, run. Oh, the sky is going to collapse. What can I do? I don't want to die. A lot of people were going crazy because there were also dark clouds above their heads, and the flashing thunderbolts were like sharp swords that could fall. Chen Chenking looked at the sky carefully and then said, "Keep calm and stay within the range of Mount Five Flowers." His voice contained part of his energy, which awakened tens of thousands of martial artists in panic. They suddenly realized that they could only survive by staying at Mount Five Flowers. Some martial artists lost their ability to think in fear. Azure Dragon and the other captains took the lead to help them with their men in all directions. Among them, the places where the big family members stayed were the most in need of help. All the Zhangs, including Jiang Nan, Jiang Chen, and Jiang Yuan, were staring at the approaching dark clouds and forgot to hide. It seemed that they had stopped thinking. They were at a loss. Is this still the power that human beings can have? Liu Feng looked at Zhang Han's figure in the dark cloud as if he were an immortal. After a while, he even knelt on the ground, crawling. He was grateful that Zhang Han hadn't killed him a few days ago. He regarded it as a gift from the immortal. As for the members of the other big families, they didn't know what to do now. They were too frightened to make a decision. The dark clouds were approaching them under everyone's gaze. However, they found that the dark clouds above Mount Five Flowers gradually dissipated before landing on them. Perhaps they moved to other places. The clouds were gradually divided into two parts. They covered the Qiao family and the Lin family, respectively. Kaboom! The shaking lasted for 30 seconds. When Zhang Han waved his right hand to dissipate all the clouds, the other martial artists on the mountain all gasped in fear after seeing what had happened. Both the Qiao family and the Lin family were destroyed. He managed it. It's terrible. I didn't expect to witness this scene today. Zhang Han Yang is invincible. Many people were shocked at what they saw. Both the Kiaos and Lin's manors were turned into ruins. They didn't know how many people were in the manors, but they knew that the Kiao family and the Lin family no longer existed in Shangjing. Even if someone in the two families were lucky enough to survive, they couldn't make any difference. Like the ordinary martial artists, all the divine realm masters on the mountain were also shocked. They had witnessed Zhang Han's move. It seemed not powerful enough and could even be called a showy but not practical skill. They could resist it easily. What shocked them was Zhang Han's weird spiritual sense mind trick. It had reached the earth realm, which was beyond their imagination and couldn't be merely recognized as powerful. How can a Grand Master have such a weird power? It's unbelievable. How far can his soul sense go? All the divine realm masters in the crowd knew that their soul sense could at most stretch a little less than 1 kilometer. However, Zhang Han's soul sense could reach someplace 7 kilometers away easily, and they didn't know where his limit was. If Zhang Han did this in the urban area, it would lead to an irreversible disaster. He was a great threat to ordinary people and could not be completely resisted. Everyone was frightened by this thought. Besides, how destructive would Zhang Han be if he attacked a range of meters in diameter with his spiritual sense mind trick? Could he be easily stopped? The other martial artists didn't know the answer. Even Mukisha didn't know what to say in the face of Zhang Han. He had already given up challenging Zhang Han. As an experienced divine realm master, it was not an honor to defeat a grand master, let alone that he was likely to lose the battle. The strong man who was hidden in the cloud looked at the direction of the Kiao family and the Lin family and then turned his gaze to Zhang Han in discouragement. Finally, when he heard the light cough of the Chan clan's warlord, he snorted coldly and left quickly. Who? Chen Chenking sighed with relief after making sure that man had gone. Then he looked at Zhang Han, who landed on the top of the old tree in the front, and said with a smile, "Brother Han, you are still so powerful. If not, I couldn't be your elder brother," Zhang Han replied happily. His words dumbfounded countless people. They had not digested the fact that Zhang Han Yang was the eldest brother of Emperor King. Young man. The Chan clan's warlord moved towards Zhang Han and said, "Have you calmed down? Follow me if you're not angry now." "Why must he go with you? Where will you go?" asked Gai Xingkong. The Chan clan's warlord shook his head helplessly when he saw Gai Xingkong's alert look. "We are going to talk about some private matters. You can follow us if you don't trust me." Then he smiled at Zhang Han. "I'm in a good mood and want to tell you some secrets. It's up to you to make the decision." The Chan clan's warlord turned into a light and flashed toward the west. "Let's go, Brother Han, I have a lot to share with you." Chen Chenking laughed and walked towards Zhang Han. "How about comparing our speed?" Zhang Han was amused. "Let's go." The vague outline of a dragon once again surrounded Chen Chenking's body. Zhang Han took a glance at Gai Xingkong and nodded. With the skill steps of immortals, he could advance tens of meters with every step, and his speed was as fast as sound. Gai Xingkong was slower than Zhang Han, so he took out his dragon tiger spear. Why can these two abnormal young men be so fast? Wang looked at their backs and smiled. The sea laughs, leading the mighty waves forward. He sang. At that moment, he even felt the chivalrous spirit that he had lost for a long time. Wang turned around and left the mountain. "You all escaped." Mukisha mumbled, took a big gulp of wine, and left in the air. After the influential masters left, the tens of thousands of martial artists were left in shock. "You can go now." Azure Dragon, who was now the most powerful man on the mountain, waved his hand. His voice was echoing above Mount Five Flowers. Countless people began to leave. They marveled as they walked. "I still feel my scalp numb. I couldn't breathe just now because of the heavy cloud. He is so fierce, no wonder he is called Merciless Zhang. What an amazing man." Even the Divine Realm Master failed to persuade him. According to the several God-state strongs, Zhang Han is qualified to be regarded as a divine realm. Oh, he is just a martial arts grandmaster now. It's a miracle that he could reach that level. What's more frightening, Emperor King is Zhang Han's little brother. Is today the end of Emperor King's time? Everyone will know how powerful Zhang Han is after today. When this sentence was heard, someone immediately objected. Stop talking nonsense. Zhang Han had already become famous in the martial arts world in China. What's more important is Xian's identity. I'd better tell my friends that Xian is his wife and must stay away from her, otherwise, they will be killed by Zhang Han one day. There were all kinds of discussions. None of them would ever forget what had happened here. Chapter 630, A Faithful Little Brother. The news that Zhang Han and Emperor King would fight with each other in Mount Five Flowers had swept the whole martial arts world in China, and almost everyone knew it, but there were not many people who could go there to watch the battle. Thus, there were still a lot of people who didn't know the news, and the tens of thousands of martial artists on the scene, very kindly and excitedly, spread the news. You know what? Just now, I was watching the battle in Mount Five Flowers. It was a shocking battle, and Zhang Han was too cruel. You know what? Just now I was watching the battle in Mount Five Flowers. It was a shocking battle and Zhang Han was too cruel. Both the Qiao family and the Lin family in Shangjing were destroyed. I can't believe it. I didn't expect such huge families to be defeated by Zhang Han and casually handled by him. Which one is it? If I remember correctly, the Guan Li families in Hong Kong, He Qingshan and the He family, the Shi family in Xihang, the Ge family in Linhai City, and the Qiao family and the Lin family in Shangjing City. My God, 7 families were all destroyed by Zhang Han alone. It's too terrible. The Li, Gu, Lin, and Qiao families were the lords of Hong Kong, Linhai, and Shangjing City. Is Zhang Han the terminator of great families? Today is just like a dream. You may not believe it that Emperor King called Zhang Han brother Zhang. Do you believe it? Merciless Zhang is the elder brother of Emperor King. Zhang Han's move just now seemed to be able to destroy the world. Even the several God-state strongs in the scene were shocked by Zhang Han's strength and dared not speak. I've heard from several elders that Zhang Han may be as powerful as a divine realm master in some aspects, although he has not completely reached that stage. His strength is comparable to those martial artists at the divine realm stage. All kinds of discussions boiled the whole martial arts world in China. Zhang Han's reputation had surpassed all the martial artists of the same stage, and he had become the #1 grandmaster in many people's eyes. He was a real invincible grandmaster. He was Merciless Zhang in Hong Kong. This amazing news also swept overseas at a breakneck speed. Many people in the martial arts circle in other regions had heard that the time of Emperor King was over and replaced by the time of Merciless Zhang. In Dongfeng Hotel, Xian, Zhang Li, and Wang Zanping were all very nervous. Soon it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they didn't know if Zhang Han had started fighting. Unconsciously, Zhang Han had become their backbone. As long as Zhang Han was there, his presence alone could make them complete their tasks with confidence and soberness, even if he didn't say anything or make any decision. Once Zhang Han was not with them, they would feel confused, let alone that Zhang Han might be dueling with Emperor King at present. It could be seen from their expressions that Emperor King was indeed a powerful opponent, and they were not sure whether Zhang Han could win the battle. Even Meng sensed this kind of depressing atmosphere and fell into silence. While playing with her little finger, she didn't know what to do or when her father would come back. BZZ. Suddenly, Xian's mobile phone rang. She quickly sat up straight and answered the phone. Sweetheart? Her voice quivered with nervousness. Yes, it's me. Xian heard Zhang Han's soft voice. Don't worry, as I told you before. Phew. Xian sighed with relief, her beautiful big eyes shone again, and her lips curled up. When will you be back? She asked excitedly. Zhang Han must have won the battle since he was able to call her. Xian didn't care about other things. Zhang Han said with a smile, "Well, it will be a while before I go back. It turns out that Emperor King is a little brother and good friend of mine." Huh? Xian was surprised. "I have something to share with his grandfather, the elder master of the Chen family, and it will take me some time." Zhang Han added, "But I should be able to go back before 3 p.m. "Oh, that's good. Take care of yourself." Xian replied in confusion, "Don't worry." Zhang Han comforted her, "Uncle Gai is with me." He knew that Gai Xingkong's company could make Xian feel more relieved. Hearing this, Xian was completely relieved and smiled softly. "Okay, we will wait for you." Wang Zanping was the first to ask, "How about it? Did Han win? How about it? Did Han win?" Wang Zanping asked at the first time. The others in the room were nervous too, with their eyes widely opened. "Huh?" Meng Meng blinked in confusion and then turned her gaze to her mother. Seeing their expressions, Xian's slightly narrowed her eyes as she chuckled and shook her head. "No. He didn't win the battle." "Why? Is Han okay?" "He didn't lose the battle either," added Xian. Everyone was confused. "What do you mean? They didn't fight?" Wang Zanping's eyes lit up. "It's the best outcome, at least Han is safe." "Yeah, ha. It would be too scary if they fought with each other." "They shouldn't fight," Tannen asked happily. "Doesn't that mean that Emperor King didn't dare to stop Zhang Han?" They all thought their guess was right. Xian was amused by them and decided not to keep them guessing. She cleared her throat and said, "All of you guessed wrong. He did see Emperor King, but they didn't fight with each other. I heard from Zhang Han that Emperor King is one of his little brothers and good friends." What did you say?" Everyone was stunned. On the other side, Zhang Han and Emperor King had stopped competing. It could be seen from Emperor King's depressed expression that he lost to Zhang Han in the speed competition. But he was still very happy. He took off side by side with Zhang Han, while the Chan clan's warlord and Gai Xingkong were leading the way ahead. Just after Zhang Han hung up, Chen Qingqing sighed with emotion. "Time flies, Brother Han. I didn't expect you to marry and have children. We haven't seen each other for many years." "Yes, we haven't seen each other for more than 6 years." Zhang Han sighed. "I heard from your elders that you were sent abroad. I was angry that you didn't tell me about it, and planned to beat you when you came back. I deserve your punishment." Chen Qingqing thought about it and nodded. "My family found I was talented at cultivation after I got in contact with the martial arts circle. I absorbed King Dragon blood and have integrated 30% of its power. My grandfather said that if I failed to advance into the divine realm before I was 30 years old, I would be in danger. Therefore, he made up his mind to take me away for further cultivation in all kinds of blessed regions. I was isolated from the outside world, and only by breaking into the divine realm could I regain my freedom," he said. "How can King Dragon blood threaten your life? Your grandfather lied to you." Zhang Han looked at the back of the Chan clan's warlord and snorted. The face of the Chan clan's warlord darkened. He could hear clearly what the two young men were discussing. He didn't mind that Chen Qingqing revealed all his secrets to Zhang Han, but he couldn't stand Zhang Han anymore after hearing his comments. "Isn't King Dragon blood unique and rare to be found? Why should I cheat him for this reason?" Considering that Zhang Han was only a junior and the brother of Qingqing, the Chan clan's warlord decided to enjoy the arrogant young man, though he wanted to argue with Zhang Han very much. Luckily, what Chen Qingqing said comforted him. Chen Qingqing shook his head and replied, "Brother Han, you've misunderstood my grandfather. I could sense that crisis during those days. Sometimes I felt the pain as if ants were tearing my body." "Really?" Zhang Han frowned slightly. "There must be a big problem with your cultivation method. Let's talk about it later. Even if you were cultivating, why didn't you call me?" "Are you sure I didn't?" Chen Qingqing rolled his eyes at Zhang Han. "Huh?" Zhang Han was confused and then burst out laughing. Yes, I changed my phone number 6 years ago. Ha ha. Chen Qingqing gave a rare laugh and looked at Zhang Han happily. Anyway, it's not too late. I didn't expect that you were Zhang Han Yang, brother Han. How did you get in contact with the martial arts world? Your cultivation speed is amazing. It's a long story which can be concluded as a coincidence. I got an unimaginable chance. Zhang Han gave a brief answer. Great, we can grow up in the martial arts world together. Emperor King looked at Zhang Han sincerely, then he said with a smile, even if the gate of the small world is opened, I will help you and fight for the time of merciless Zhang. His words surprised both the Chan clan's warlord and Gai Xingkong. Gai Xingkong recalled the old days when he and Zhang Guangyu were traveling in the martial arts world. They are really good brothers. Gai Xingkong looked at the Chan clan's warlord. Yes, replied the Chan clan's warlord, but he was sighing to himself. Qingqing, your life will no longer be peaceful if you are determined to help him. While the two elders were leading the way ahead, Zhang Han and Chen Qingqing were chatting happily behind, and they burst into laughter from time to time. The Chan clan's warlord was delighted by Chen Qingqing's laughter. Qingqing has suffered a lot all these years. Everyone knew the time of Emperor King and his amazing strength, but few of them knew his efforts and pain. The Chan clan's warlord agreed with this saying. If God would give an important task to a certain person, the first things he does is to temper his willpower, fatigue his muscles and bones, starve his stomach, and destitute his body. It was evident that Emperor King had suffered a lot that many people had never experienced before he made such brilliant achievements. The saying made sense. But if Zhang Han heard it, he would say, all roads lead to Rome. But what about those born in Rome?